Okay, this is just about 7 o'clock on July 18th, regular meeting of the Common Council of the City of Oneonta. It's called to order.
Mayor Janet?
Here.
Councilmember Murphy?
Here.
Councilmember Lewis?
Here.
Councilmember Rosberger?
Here.
Councilmember Hardeman? Here. Councilmember Carson?
Here.
Councilmember Harrington?
Here.
Councilmember Overby?
Here.
Councilmember Duncan?
Okay, now we're going to toss the Pledge of Allegiance to our newest council member, Ed Overby. So Ed, if you'd lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And that will be in your hand. All right, we have a presentation from one of my favorite groups, one that I'm very connected to, it seems like, these days. Our Housing Commission's work group, senior housing, and if you identify yourselves and take it away.
Sure. I'm Tammy Reed, Director of Otsego County Office for the Aging and the Chair of the Senior Housing Work Group.
I'm Andrea Ranovich, a member of the work group.
And Bob Rosowski, former member of the Housing Commission and liaison to the Senior Housing Work Group.
And Ellen Fallon was our other committee member who couldn't make it tonight. So I'm just gonna start basically. Are you okay if I stay here? Is there any place to sit? Okay. So we wanted to kind of just highlight some of the work that we've been doing over the past 6 months. We started in September of 2022. We spent about a 6-month period really pulling some data and talking to key stakeholders to get some basic information. So what we first did is we looked at the different senior housing models throughout the country, and that included, you can flip to the next page if you want, thank you. That really included accessory dwelling units, otherwise known as ADUs. We looked at traditional housing complexes. We looked at the village-to-village model, which is kind of an up-and-coming throughout the country, and then we looked at home sharing and some different models. We then conducted in February a survey which went out electronically, but also paper formats went out within the community. And then in March we did a focus group where we brought in about a dozen seniors within the community and were able to kind of dive in a little bit deeper with some of our questions from the survey. The next slide. So I think one of the strongest pieces that we really found, which was no surprise to any of us, is that older adults want to stay in their own homes. They want to remain aging in place. And if they're not able to do that, their second preference really was about downsizing into something that's more manageable to them. So that could either be they were going to purchase a smaller house or rent a smaller apartment, or they were going to look at either single family or apartment type of living. What we also heard was that the least preferred options was to move into a long-term care facility, but below that was moving in with family or family moving in with them. As much as we love our family, apparently we don't want them living with us. But I think that was a really strong component, is that we don't want to live with strangers and we don't necessarily want to kind of share our space. That autonomy is really valued, and that was something that we heard strongly. So just to kind of go over some of our concerns, you can flip to the next one. These are the main, I think, concerns that people really shared. First and foremost was affordability. That was the highest ranked concern that we heard from. And this really doesn't matter what people's income levels are. We all have kind of a threshold that we feel comfortable within. And so whether people were going to stay living in their home or look at other housing, that was their main concern is can I afford to do it? So secondly was maintenance. Besides the cost of maintaining their home, they wanted to kind of know who was going to help me maintain my home. So if any of you have had to do any kind of home remodeling or construction work, finding a contractor is a challenge. Finding individuals that have the skill sets to be able to do minor home repairs like home mods, maybe some plumbing, lawn care, sidewalk care, or even roofs and things like that. That's a challenge to kind of find someone for somebody who's not able to do those things independently. Third was availability, and I think the question really here was, what are our other options? If you look around Oneonta, you certainly see that we have subsidized housing for seniors, and then you see that we have a very high income assisted living facility other than nursing homes. And that can range anywhere from $4,000 to $5,000 to $6,000 a month for people. So there's not really anything in between that, and I think that's what residents are really looking for. Fourth was the physical layout of the home. This is really around those 2- and 3-story old homes that many of us live in. When you have laundry facilities down in a basement or bathroom facilities in a bedroom up on the 2nd floor. So when mobility issues start to be a concern, those are challenges when a home that you're trying to age in place. The next one was being near services and supports. Obviously, as we get older, maybe we're not driving as much, maybe we don't have as much of a family network. We want to be near services, so grocery shopping, hospital facilities, socialization opportunities, things like that. And then the final area that we wanted to share with you, it doesn't really necessarily concern the city directly, and we didn't include this in our recommendations, but we did want to include it in kind of what was shared with concerns. That's, of course, around transportation, home care supports, who's going to be able to help me as I get older, and then how do I stay engaged as I lose a spouse, as my informal networks shrink, what opportunities do I have to stay engaged in my community. So when we were looking at recommendations for the city, we really wanted to not only make sure that these were recommendations that fit the older adult population, but we wanted to make sure it fit a diverse representation of our community. And we also wanted to make sure that what we recommended here fits other target populations that the Housing Commission is focused on. We're too small of a community to do different models for every different target population. So what we hopefully are recommending here are options that work for the older adult population, but they also work for other target populations that we're looking at. And finally, we wanted to make sure it's something that is doable. We didn't want to provide recommendations that weren't going to be achieved, and then we all just wasted our time. So hopefully these are recommendations that we feel like can be achieved by the city. So the first recommendation, really, because there is such a hope and plan for older adults to be able to age in place, providing more opportunities for home rehabilitation, whether that's through tax incentives or grant opportunities. Otsego Rural Housing, USDA, they already provide some type of funding like this, but it is extremely limited. And so we would just encourage that the city seek other opportunities to bring in for its residents to be able to remodel their homes. What we love about this is great for older adults, but this also helps improve our aging inventory of the housing. And that is a major concern for anybody that's moving into the area. They don't want to move into houses that need to have $100,000 worth of repairs put in. So again, I think at some point we saw CDBG funding was being made available for this type of opportunity, and we would just encourage more of that. Secondly is to explore options to help older adults with that home maintenance. First really is either partnerships maybe with BOCES, possibly partnerships with the colleges and the college students, or some type of shared services model. I think when we look at village-to-village model, different things like that, if there's a way that those type of services can be pooled together so that residents are able to kind of purchase those services collectively and not have to work to kind of find those. If I have a landline and phone books are no longer in use and I don't have access to the internet and I don't have word of mouth, a way to be able to ask people, it's really challenging to even find who does this work and how do I access them, let alone how do I afford it. The other piece of this too is, would it be a possibility and something to look at is could the city provide these services at a fee for residents that are no longer able to maintain it themselves? So being able to kind of provide yard work, either mowing lawns or shoveling sidewalks, things like that, again, to make the greater community benefit. And then the third and final really revolves around our newly built housing. Obviously, when we look at housing, we hope to see new housing built in this area to bring in more professionals and young people, but also to, allow for older adults to move into the area as well. So when doing this, what we are really encouraging is looking also, in addition to multi-level housing, but looking at single-level housing. 1 or 2 bedroom homes 800 to 1,200 square feet. They have small lots of land with low maintenance, maybe shared services that are included. And I think what we heard is they're not looking for seniors age-specific housing. They're very open to mixed community housing as long as they're kind of as a shared vision. Everybody, I don't want to say homeowner association, that's a little bit more punitive and restrictive, but certainly a community where there's people of all ages but have a shared vision on what their community looks like. So that's kind of the final piece of the recommendations. I did just want to do a plug on the next slide for age-friendly community. This is something I spoke with Mayor Drenick about probably initially when you first started, and it's something I've just been wanting to share with the community. This is really important to us because if we want a community that is good for older adults, it includes these 8 domains. What I love about this is these 8 domains are not only good for older adults, they are great for kids, they are great for people with disability, they are great for everybody in the community. So we want to have good housing, we want to have social participation engagement, we want to have good transportation systems, we want to have access to good healthcare opportunities and things like that. So I will leave that with you, but if you guys have any other thoughts, I think Oneonta would be a great location to kind of help us launch this within our area. So I'll leave you with that, and then if there's any questions, we are certainly available to answer.
Yes, I have 2 questions. One is with regard to affordability. You mentioned that you had identified a threshold, sort of no matter what income level or what income was from person to person. Do you have like a number for what that threshold is?
I think we really looked at when we heard in our focus group was probably where we dove into that the most was under 200,000 when we're looking at purchasing, and then rental. I'm probably a little bit more hesitant with rental because I see people who lose a spouse and they can afford housing when they're married. They lose that spouse and now their income is in half. And so I think sustainability in that regard, we're looking like around $1,000 rent or less. And again, that's not unmanageable. That's what a young adult would be looking at as well. So yeah, I think we're just looking in between these really high income and really low subsidized income, which is the large majority of your population.
Yeah,
So,
there's that donut hole is always kind of hard to solve for.
Yes.
There doesn't seem to be funding opportunities.
Yes.
Or you can't be self-funded. So
Exactly.
it's been struggling forever. Okay, second question is about physical layout and aging in place. So for people who do already have 2- and 3-story homes, and they don't want to sell, they want to age in place, did your group and your focus group like brainstorm any ideas to kind of solve for that?
We talked about, you guys can jump into it quick. We talked about home sharing because I think that's a really nice model where you can take these large homes that has one person living in it a lot of times, and they do only want to be living in one floor of it, and maybe they can either rent out to a graduate student or some to use that space. I think for the most part, home sharing was not something that people were interested in. I think it scares people because they don't know who they're inviting into the home. Again, they don't necessarily want family moving in, but at the same time, and I think that is something we still need to continue to explore because people, they can't afford these homes. So I think it's a really nice way to create extra income. But there is a model, and home sharing is a really nice model where you have a nonprofit organization that vets kind of the whole process and matches people up. And that is something that does work well. And I think we've seen it work in communities like Vermont. So it's not necessarily full urban communities that it works best in. It can be done in different ways. Do you guys have any other thoughts to that
Well, there
question?
may also be opportunities to make 2 or 3 stories story homes into floor by floor apartments. Probably be more expensive than the other way
Right.
because probably need the elevators, et cetera.
And that way they'd have their laundry room and all of that on one level as a single-family home.
Okay.
There's a question, please.
Yeah, looking at the village movement, and I apologize, I didn't have a chance to read
That's
this
okay.
before you guys got
Sure.
here, but the village movement,
Sorry, sir.
is this, in your research on this, who typically initiated this type of movement in each community? Was it the municipality that initiated it? Was it some not-for-profit that developed? And then initiated this? Like, how did they start?
It's usually very grassroots, and I think that's what makes Village to Village model successful, is that it's seniors that say, we want this, and they really kind of start it. So they usually, they buy into it, they kind of lead it. There is a nonprofit that oversees it and manages it for them, but it has very low staff overhead, and really it's about the members that kind of say we want, and that's where they are able to do shared services. So they either, a lot of them will engage volunteers and utilize volunteers for like small home repairs, or being able to help each other out, a little bit of bartering sometimes. You'll see those types of things. We haven't really seen municipalities involved in Village to Village, but it's not a bad thing. I think it has to be a whole community that really supports it,
Well, I think
especially one that's our size.
I think it's much harder for municipalities to
Yes.
start that. But I'll admit, when I first saw this, the first thing I thought were these little condominium villages that I see popping up in other communities.
Yep.
And that's not what this is. It's a village, right?
Right.
It's sort of enveloped within, in our case, it would be the city of Oneonta. I
Right.
think it's a great idea.
And I think the natural occurring retirement communities are similar to that, because they are already a community, and it's a community that is aging. So it may be in an urban area, a high rise that they're staying and they're living there and that building is aging. But for us, it would be our community is aging. And so, you can have a network, because we are small enough and we have that luxury to build your network within the greater community. So people can stay in their homes, but they're also connected to kind of these shared services and supports that they are able to kind of negotiate within their own membership.
One more question, if you don't mind. Did you, and I apologize again if this is in here and I just haven't seen
That's
it
okay.
yet, but did you do the age breakdown of the Oneonta community at large? Like what percentage of the community is 65 and older? 50 and
We
older?
haven't specifically for Oneonta, so yeah, we can definitely look at that specifically. I don't think we did look at that, we just looked at the respondents.
And more countywide.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at what's going to happen
So that'd
between
be
now
easy to
and
do.
2030 with the baby boomer generation doubling over the
Yeah.
age of 65, I think it would be good to know those numbers. I think it might kind of wake us up
Yep.
to the issue that's coming.
Yep, and I think, we're already seeing it in our workforce, right? Those vacancies that we all have is from that generation exiting the workforce. So the next step in the next 10, 15, 20 years is going to be kind of, needing more services and support, so.
Dr. Nicole Blanchard was our first chair, and she has that kind of material, I think, so we could try to get it from her.
Yep.
She had to resign because of work challenges.
But it's easy to pull, we have population statistics that we can run.
Further questions or comments, Council?
I have one question. I wasn't sure from reading your report if your committee was aware that the ADUs are permitted in the Oneonta Code.
Yes, we were actually very excited, which is why we didn't put it in as part of the recommendations. I think that would have been a recommendation, but we were able to find out that that was already an option, and so kudos to the city for allowing that.
So our job is to take this very good report, thank you very much for that, and make sure that it gets traction over the course of these next several months within the council on the various things that we'll be looking at as agenda items. We'll certainly be visiting this, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll move on to our petitioners and public hearings. And do we have a petitioner? And Mark, if you'd identify yourself and let us know where you live.
I'm Mark Boschnack. I live on 107 River Street, and I brought some pictures of the area that I'm talking about. Mark, give me a second.
Thank you.
What's the single one?
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, we were asking that the tree that was recently planted next to our property at 107 River Street be removed, and in the future, the policy has changed, so this kind of thing doesn't happen again. We've spent a lot of time and money repairing damages from trees that fell during the storms we had in the last couple of years, as everyone has. So when we saw the city workers planting the tree on Thursday, we were kind of shocked that no one told us or our neighbors or asked our approval about before that it was planted. In fact, one of our neighbors saw the city plant, marking the spot to be for a tree. She came out and told him that she didn't want it, and he said okay and walked away. And we never had that option. You know, and it's not that we don't appreciate trees. We have several large ones on our property, and we keep them trimmed and make sure that they can weather the storms, but not every tree does that. You know, so we're not really looking for another tree to threaten our power lines. If you look at one of the smaller pictures there, it's planted right across from a bunch of shrubs that are there. It'll grow into that, as well as block our vision from when we go out of our driveway, which right now there's cars that zoom around the corner there, and we have to be careful when we come out of there. So I guess the overriding issue here is a safety issue, you know, in a lot of forms. We've had good response from our city councilman, Scott Harrington, and Len Carson came by the house from the, I guess you're from the Quality of Life Committee, and the mayor's been very willing to talk about it. But we were told that what needs to be done to resolve the issue is to come to talk to the council and ask them to take the step where they could be responsive to the neighbors, you know. And I know when trees have been wanted to be planted in the past, neighbors were asked about it. And some neighbors took them and some neighbors didn't, and that was okay. You know, but in this case, we were told that we didn't really have that option, that the city had already made a decision, and that, you know, that they could do what they want. So we were told the next step was, like I said, to come here. So that's what I'm doing, and I hope you see our plight and give us that option.
Thank you very much. And this will be a discussion item in the supplemental agenda that everybody received earlier today. Thank you very much. Do we have any other petitioners? Yes.
I'm literally a petitioner. My name is Paul Conway. I've been in Oneonta for 40 years in the city. And I recently developed, along with several other people, a petition, and we've circulated it just the last month. And it's been a surprising turnout of enthusiastic, relatively informed people, as well as a few people who are out of the city. But it's really surprising how much enthusiasm there is for this idea on the petition. Please prioritize using the Stella Luna facility, the old railroad station, which is such a magnificent place and pretty close to where the transit hub's going to be. So the petition really urges the council and the mayor to slow down the process of decision-making, to really investigate the possibility of making the Stella Luna facility a central part of the transit hub, and investigate all aspects of the logistics and the financial placing of the transit hub in relation to Stella Luna. And adjacent property, of course, is relevant, whether it's available and how it might be available, how it might be used, that should be considered. So I'm really asking the council and the mayor to really prioritize the Stella Luna facility. It's so unique, so beautiful. It would add so much more to a transit hub if it was central. And so, again, please slow down and investigate and prioritize the Stella Luna facility. Consider several independent investigations and recommendations into how that historic and really wonderful facility can be an integral part of the new transit hub for Oneonta. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And I think I may have mentioned the last time we were together, August 15th is the second meeting of the council in the month of August, and we'll be taking that up during that meeting as a discussion item. So, thank you, Paul. Any other?
Specifically the Stella Luna building?
Yes, specifically what was addressed here, yes. Any other petitioners? Okay, if there are none, I see none, then we'll move on to our boards and commission reports. Now, we had our first meeting of the planning I'm sorry, I'm ahead of myself. It wasn't our first meeting. I'm looking forward to the landmark and historic preservation announcement that I'll make in a second. But the Planning Commission had a meeting in June, and Councilmember Risper, if you can report on that.
Sure, I just take this one out. This was, we have one item on the agenda, it was 84 Spruce Street. This is a house that has been empty for a significant amount of time. It was purchased by Mr. Scolari from Ardsley, New York. And he wanted permission to demo an existing dormer on the front facade of the above noted property. The trouble is, he had already removed the dormer as well as the chimney, and without a permit. So he said that the contractor told him that he was taking care of the permits, but either way the contractor did not take care of the permits. So, excuse me, he said that he was remodeling the house for, excuse me, for a niece and nephew who are going to school here. The neighbors were happy the house was sold, but they're concerned about the what was being done with it. So this was a type 2 seeker that was passed by the commission, and there was a lot of discussion about the site plan, not necessarily the demo for the dormer, but there was some discussion about setting a precedent for doing a job and asking permission later. They made the site plan review with conditions tied to that, so that all architectural features have to remain, any exterior work needs to be replaced in kind, and there's conditional approval with any future replacements must be done in kind. So the size and location of windows, porch doors, window trim, porch trim. So one thing that he had discussed doing that the commission put a stop to is he was removing windows in the back bedrooms, so he could put 2 TVs up in the 2 back bedrooms that he was making downstairs. So the demo permit ultimately was approved, and he's got a lot of work ahead of him. So,
Anything further?
nope.
Any questions? Yes.
So this homeowner went to our code enforcement office and got a building permit, a demo permit, before all this started?
No.
He didn't get any permits at all
No.
to do the roof?
What he said was the contractor said he was gonna take care of all that. And nobody came in to get a permit, that's all I know. Whether I'm assuming he was being truthful, in which case the contractor never came in. So, and we found out about it just because the neighbors spoke up and said the dormer was gone.
So is this the same contractor that did the roof is doing the interior demolition?
That I did not know.
Good question. Further questions? Okay, thank you, Dave. Moving on to the Landmark and Historic Preservation Commission. I don't know, is there anyone in this room that was a party to that meeting, that first meeting of this group? Bob! So,
Actually,
Bob, so glad to have you here. So, 2 things. Before I'm going to ask you to actually tell us what happened at that meeting, but I also want to inform the council that we've a liaison now to that commission, and Councilmember Murphy has volunteered to step up and add that to his charge. So thank you very much, Luke. And Bob, if you would.
Sure. Yeah, it's actually, we had a June meeting and a July meeting. We tried to have a May meeting, but we didn't have a quorum. Right now, we are setting the groundwork for getting approval from the National Park Service and the State Historic Preservation Office to proceed. Now, this is part of the Certified Local Government Program, and as part of that, there has to be a Landmarks and Historic Preservation Commission, but no actions can be taken until we prove to National Park Service and SHPO that we have appropriately formed the commission, that the people on the commission have the necessary backgrounds, and that we have otherwise set the groundwork for our future actions. One of the those first actions after we get approval is to go to the council and define what properties will be covered. Make a recommendation to the council what properties should be covered by the ordinance. So that will be our first action after we meet that approval process that Steve Early has been an important part of. I was chosen chair of the, or elected chair of the commission, and Sarah Evanson is the vice chair, and we have 5 additional members, no, 4 additional members. I think that's,
Sure.
I didn't know I was going to do this, so I'm talking off the
Pretty
right.
good, Bob, pretty good. Seasoned professionals in our gallery here. So anyone have any questions or comments that they'd like to direct toward Bob? All right, well, you're up next month, Luke.
Actually, one question, just so I know. When do we meet?
Yes, the second Monday of the month.
Second one, okay. Thank you. That'll be helpful.
That was the only time that Jerry Webster can meet, so it kind of set the agenda for us.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Bob, really appreciate it. And moving on to our environmental board report and Councilmember Pease.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I did not attend the meeting, but reviewed it on our YouTube site. Thank you, Carrie. So let's see. They first discussed correspondence they received regarding an air quality sensor. Now, I also received the same correspondence, and it was also part of the wellness agenda. I think we've come to the same conclusion. I'll cover that a little bit more whenever I get to the Community Wellness Committee. They did talk about updates they'd like to make to the draft tree ordinance that they've put together and is being looked at by staff. They received updates from one of the board members about the deer management plan and where that is in the process, which is it's gone to the Quality Life Construction Committee, who's moving that forward. They talked about getting involved in some of the different community events taking place downtown, begin trying to promote some both environmental action and thinking about the deer and some of the different approaches to dealing with the deer and deer management. And then lastly, came up kind of as a last minute topic, was a talk about a citywide pickup for composting. They'd like to explore that a little bit more. So those were the kind of hot topic items that were discussed at that particular meeting.
Sure. Questions or comments? Well, thank you very much, appreciate it. And moving on now to Public Arts, but Emily's not with us this evening. I think we can just push that on until our next get together first. And that takes us then to the Finance and Human Resources Committee report, and Councilmember LaVar Singh.
Yeah, we met last Thursday, which was the 13th. On our agenda, we discussed the 27 Market Street building demolition. On our agenda tonight, motion 14 discusses the cooperative purchasing, which we have presentation from Delaware Engineering and Core Construction, which is out of Binghamton. They are members of the construction company is members of the cooperative. We got a pretty good presentation from them as to why, what the benefits of a purchasing cooperative would be. In this particular case, the biggest thing is that there are a lot of unknowns at the site, and so there's a benefit to having the contractors who will perform the work take a look at the site and come up with their own sort of scope of work and speculation on what they think they'll encounter, and contingencies for all of that versus us kind of doing it and then they encounter things that we haven't budgeted for. So I have more notes on that, but that was off the top of my head. We also discussed, I'm just going to go with the things that are on our agenda first. We also discussed motions 4 and 5. The firefighter appointments. We have 3 budgeted vacancies. This would be to appoint 2 of them. 54 people took the civil service exam for firefighter. Everyone passed. 24 people took, of those 54, 24 took the physical agility portion. There was a 70% success rate. I just wanted to mention that because I know that at the fire department there has been some work into making the physical agility more descriptive of what the actual duties of the job are, and they actually had a higher success rate based on interaction with the candidates, and now we know that these folks are well equipped to actually do the job. And I think that there was also a benefit of that is that there's time spent with the candidates ahead of time. So I just want to shout them out for that because it seems like it was effective. Of those 70% who passed, there were 8 interviews, and we have 2 who've made it to our agenda tonight. We also discussed, is that on here? I'm sorry, you guys read my mind. The ARPA, yes, sorry, motion 7, which I missed, is the funding request from the ARPA funds to pave it won't be, the entirety of the 5K route in Neowa will be paved, but it's not for paving the entire route, if that makes sense. And we got an update on our ARPA spending. We got an update on the management agreement with the Ford Block for the easement for the arcade walkway, so that will be a contract that's forthcoming. We have the easement, but this is a contract. This is a payment, so. We discussed a tree planting grant application for Market Street. That's through the Urban and Community Forestry Grant Program. It's due August 16th. It's up to a $75,000 grant award with a 25% match, which is up to $18,750, but it depends on how much we're awarded. So the match is dependent on the award. That would cut down on the expense of adding street trees to Market Street during the Market Street streetscape improvement project. We have the 2023 Accelerated Transit Capital ATC funding reserve for the transit hub. So there's $101,811, which can be used for OPT capital expenses, but the recommendation is to reserve it for the transit hub because we know that that's going to cost a lot of money. 2024 budget process, you all see on the agenda. I think, is that everything? Did I get everything? Yes, we discussed revenue generation briefly. We had an idea from the chief about kind of going over the fee schedules with regard to the fire department. So we're going to look into that a little bit. And actually after the meeting, I got a recommendation from Councilmember Harrington about looking into the fee schedules with the police department as well. So we'll take a look at that next. That's everything.
Questions? Len?
Katie, the cooperative, I think you met motion 6. You mentioned 14, which is the 2024 budget.
Oh, whoops.
But
Yeah.
Either way, so the cooperative program is allowing the contractor to go to 27 Market Street and do a thorough inspection and then give a bid.
Correct.
Why do we have to go all the way to Texas to get into this co-op?
I think the cooperative is based in New York State, right? But the third-party estimator is in Texas. Yeah, TIPS is in Texas.
I thought number 6 was for the HVAC and stuff that Chris needs to get some stuff done. It's not for 27 Market yet.
So number 6, yeah, that's a good thing to clarify. So number 6 is just authorizing us to join the cooperative or to use the cooperative as a purchasing agency. It doesn't authorize any specific projects. It basically makes them an option for projects that we have in the future. So Chris mentioned the HVAC system of the public safety building. We could use them for that. We could also use them for 27 Market Street. The presentation that we saw was about 27 Market Street and the benefits of the cooperative in that situation. But this is just authorizing basically us being able to use them in the future for projects.
Okay.
Yeah, and sorry, yeah, I did misspeak, because I saw Finance Human Resources Committee down here, and I was like, oh, that must be it, but.
And then motion 8, we're reserving the $31,811,000. It's being earmarked towards the transit hub, even though we're not even near that point.
Correct, because we know that that's something, well, it's a recommendation, that's what the motion is suggesting. Because we know that that's gonna be an expensive project, so it just takes off, you know, a little bit of the bond, basically. But we were also assured at the meeting that should we choose to not build a transit hub or not do anything, that we could unreserve that money in the future.
Okay.
I just wanna make sure Jimmy's nodding while he's
And just for additional information, the council has already approved the 2020, 21, and 22 ATC funds that are being held for the local match of the transit hub. So this adds to that pile of funds.
And then motion 9, the local match, which is in kind for $18,750, but it's a mixture of in-kind services and funds. How much was the funds, and where did you, it says that we're pulling that from the community landscaping fund. How much money was actually pulled?
None yet, because we haven't applied for the grant. Yeah, please.
This is for the application, and it will depend on how much we're awarded, as far as what our local match will be. The grant application, which Judy probably could expand on, we're going to be including approximately $5,000 of in-kind services from city staff, which can go towards the local match. But say we only get awarded $50,000, so then it would only be, that much less for our local match.
So it's basically a third for
It's-
in-kind services.
It's 25%. Yeah.
Okay, I did say it, but
Yes, thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you very much, Amy, and we'll move on then to our community vote for Councilman Davis. Back to you.
Thanks, Mayor. We met last night, Ms. Chambers. So first off, we talked about having a follow-up food insecurity meeting. There was a lot of interest in our last meeting. They felt there was a great deal of value in having kind of everyone getting together. So we have tentatively scheduled that for October 3rd from 3 to 4:30, and we'll work to confirm that with participants shortly. We also talked about a follow-up meeting for, we had an earlier meeting in April, I think it was, in terms of children and teen kind of health and wellness. Combine that together. And we tentatively scheduled that for the 24th of October, also from 3 to 4:30. Both of those are Tuesdays. So we will, again, try to convene the different folks that have an interest in these particular areas and keep facilitating the conversations amongst our community organizations. Sorry, I just scrolled over my notes. We also, the air quality monitoring sensor installation request was sent to me. It was a timely request, and last night as we were meeting, clearly we had poor air quality, so we had a great deal of discussion about that. One of the things that we agreed upon, Greg has been looking into that and had some thoughts about that, so thank you, Greg, for kind of starting that. But one of the things that we as a committee thought would be helpful would be, regardless, is that we begin to figure out how we get information like the air quality into the hands of citizens. We also talked about the wastewater COVID results and how we get those. So there was quite a bit of interesting discussion about how, what steps do we take to get information out, recognizing that we are all challenged by the different ways, email, apps, websites, Facebook. There's so many different ways that everyone engages information. How do we get that out? So that's something I think we'd like to return to and really make sure we kind of think about how we gather that data, if we're able to go ahead with that sensor and get that information out to the public. We had a lot of questions about a sensor, maintenance costs, accuracy, does it feed into the AirNow site? So there's certainly, I think, a lot of interest in this from this committee in investigating further an air sensor in Oneonta or perhaps several. I think that wraps up that conversation. And then we had some new business, which was actually old business, but I didn't have it on the agenda. We talked about wellness goals and the idea of beginning to think about what does wellness mean to the community. Defining wellness and almost kind of having, and we agreed kind of near the end of our meeting that almost like a vision statement or a mission statement about what wellness means to our community. And then once we were able to establish that, and Katie had some examples, I think it was from Minnesota, where one particular community had 3 kind of wellness goals: connectedness, livability, and equity, perhaps similar to what we saw with the senior housing, which seemed to be some all-encompassing types of ideas. So the discussion that we had as a committee was that we would like to move forward on this in August. Our August meeting is to discuss a little bit more this concept of wellness and how we would define that, what is our view of that. And then the reason I think this is important is because this can be integrated into thinking. For example, as we're thinking about budgets, where does these wellness goals, where are they kind of represented in the budget? So again, I think these are early conversations, but I'm hoping that these might be able to provide a kind of sense of thinking about who we are and how we value wellness that is filtered into the things we do. So,
Perfect, thank you. Comments?
Linda, you kind of flashed ahead of me, no? Okay, good.
Thank you, Mark. That was excellent. All right, very good. We'll move on to our city administrator's report. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. Our current, I haven't mentioned in a while, so I figured I'd update you on our current employment opportunities. We are still advertising for police officers. The exam applications to take the exam are due August 7th. The exam is in September 9th. We have an open ordinance inspector position in the code enforcement office. We have several positions open on the DPW streets, water and sewer crew. We're looking for equipment operators, maintenance workers, and or water distribution maintenance mechanics. Also in DPW in the engineering office, we have an engineering projects coordinator position. And in finance, we have an accountant and a successor finance director. And in OPT, we have availability for part-time bus drivers. We received the report from the state on the May sales tax. We received $605,391. About $128,000 more than last year in that month. Year to date, we're $153,000 more than last year, just about 6.5%. Ginny's done a lot of hard work once again in preparing for the audit. The field work by the auditors has been complete. There were no findings, and Ginny's working on preparing the audited financials now. The auditors, as is typical each year, sometime this fall, usually in October, they'll present to council on that. The Blenderama, second annual Blenderama 3-on-3 basketball tournament is scheduled for Saturday and Sunday, July 29th and 30th, downtown Saint Street. Wilbur Lake Trail Bridge, the structure is still expected to be delivered in September. Bids are out now and are due back August 2nd for installation, and we're anticipating installation being complete by the end of September. Center Street Bridge deck has been poured. That project is on target to be completed by August 18th. That's our deadline there to avoid impacts to the increased traffic that comes with the students returning to school. After that, the contractor Eastman will move over to the bridge at Clinton Street. And the parking garage demolition bid package is anticipated to be advertised August 4th. Obviously, we'll be receiving bids and considering those likely at the September 5th council meeting. That's all I had, unless there are any questions from council.
Do we have any questions? All right, thank you very much, Greg. As to my remarks, nothing from me tonight, although I'll be more than making up for that at our next meeting, so forewarned. With that, we'll move over to our consent agenda and start with motion number 1, the approval of the minutes. Motion that the common council approves the minutes of the regular meeting held July 5th. Motion number 2, that the Common Council approves the minutes of the special meeting held July 11th, 2023. Approval of the warrants. Motion number 3, that the Common Council approves the warrants totaling $251,582.01, and that the same be placed on the Director of Finance's desk for payment as presented. Motion number 4, that the Common Council approves the City Administrator's appointment of Benjamin Mariano to the position of firefighter at a base annual salary of $39,789, IAFF's Step 1 Salary Schedule D2, effective August 7, 2023, subject to the satisfaction of all applicable civil service and pre-employment requirements. Motion number 5, that the Common Council approves the City Administrator's appointment of Thomas Snyder to the position of firefighter at a base annual salary of $39,789, IAFF Step 1 Salary Schedule D2, effective August 7, 2023, subject to the satisfaction of all applicable civil service and pre-employment requirements. Motion number 6, that the Common Council authorizes the purchasing agent to complete the interlocal participation agreement for the city to become a member of the Interlocal Purchasing System, TIPS, a national cooperative purchasing program offered by Region 8 Education Service Center located in Pittsburgh, Texas, Kemp County, and further authorizes this entity to be added to the city's purchasing policy nationwide intergovernmental joint purchasing consortium section, subject to the review of the city attorney. Motion number 7, that the Common Council approves the creation of the capital project budget for the completion of the Newa Park pedestrian paths, the additional 5K race course loop in the amount of $35,000, to be funded with the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, funds. The Council further authorizes the necessary budget transfers and amendments. Motion number 8, that the Common Council approves the following resolution. Whereas the City of Oneonta has been awarded funding under New York State's 2023 Accelerated Transit Capital, ATC, in the amount of $101,811, and whereas the ATC award provides 100% state capital funding to rehabilitate, restore, and modernize public transportation services in upstate New York. And whereas the city is required to submit an application for state approval for the disbursement of these funds, now therefore be it resolved that the city administrator is authorized to submit an application for the release of those funds, which shall request the funds to be utilized towards the construction of the Transit Hub capital project. And be it further resolved, the city administrator is authorized to execute any grant agreements upon approval of this application. And be it further resolved that the city administrator is authorized to order any necessary budget amendments, transfers, and actions to provide additional required information to implement the approval of the application, this application, subject to the review by the city attorney. Motion number 9, that the Common Council approves the following resolution. Whereas the City of Oneonta desires to apply for $75,000 in financial assistance to the New York State Department of Conservation, NYSDEC, for the 2023 Urban and Community Forestry Grant Program, Round 16, to purchase street trees to enhance the Market Street Transportation Improvement Plan. And whereas the required local match totals $18,750, which will be funded with in-kind services and funds from the local Community Landscaping Fund. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the city administrator of the City of Oneonta is hereby authorized and directed to file an application for funds from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation through the 2023 Urban and Community Forestry Grants Program Round 16, and upon approval of said request to enter into and execute a project agreement with the state for such financial assistance to the City of Oneonta for the Forestry Grant Program. And be it further resolved that the Common Council authorizes the city administrator to order any necessary budget amendments, budget provisions, and/or transfers, and to take any action and to provide any additional information that might be required to undertake the proposed grant application, acceptance, or execution. And lastly, motion number 10, that the Common Council approves the ordinance creating 94 buildings, demolition of the code of the City of Oneonta. This ordinance was laid electronically on desks on Monday, July 3rd, 2023, which ends our consent agenda. Any motions to be pulled? Luke?
Number 1, please.
Number one. right, Len?
Number 10.
Number 10. And Scott?
I'm gonna do number 2.
Number 2.
Len took number 10 on me.
All right. Excluding those, do I have a motion to approve? Katie, followed by Davies, and roll.
Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger?
Yes.
Councilmember LaPartie? Councilmember Carson?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Ogilvy?
Yes.
Terrific. So we'll go with this one at a time, starting with motion number 1. Murphy, you pulled motion number 1. Do I have a motion to approve? Len, followed by Katie, and Luke.
I was unavailable to be here, and I do not doubt Carrie's meeting minute taking skills, but I can't vote on it, so
That's visual. So if there's no further discussion, we'll take the vote.
Councilmember Murphy?
abstain.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger?
Yes.
Councilmember LaPartie?
Aye.
Councilmember Carson?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Ogilvy?
Abstain.
Okay. Very good. Now we move into motion number 2. Do I have a approve? Katie, followed by Len and Scott. Similarly.
Yeah, I wasn't here for the meeting, but I'm not gonna say what Luke said, I'll be in trouble.
Okay. So, any further discussion? No. Can we take the vote? Please.
Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger?
Yes.
Councilmember LaPartie?
Aye.
Councilmember Carson?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington?
Abstain.
Councilmember Ogilvy?
Aye. All right, finally, that takes us to motion number 10, which was moved by Len. Do I have a motion to approve? Len, followed by Mark Davies, and Len?
I had a couple questions. I noticed there's a space between 144 square feet. It's referenced in section 94-4 permit exceptions. A permit is not required for demolition of a structure that is 144 square feet or less. And then the next number that I see is in section 94-6 site plan review. Any structure that exceeds 200 square feet shall require site plan review by the City of Oneonta Planning Commission. What happens between 144 and 200?
Yeah, code enforcement is able to issue a permit without it going to the planning commission for anything between 144 and 200.
So, doesn't it? Am I misreading this?
It doesn't.
Why wouldn't it just go to 200 then?
Oh, because 144 is, we don't require a building permit for a structure under 144 square feet, so we're not going to require a demolition permit for under 144 square feet. But over 144, you need a building permit, which is why.
I see.
it goes to-
Okay, so no permit for 144 or less, but you need a building permit, and it's under the code enforcement from 144 to 200.
I don't know if that's true. I think building permits all go. Is that, I don't know the answer to that. I think that they all go to planning.
Building permit, demo permit.
Everything above 200 goes, needs a site plan review, so they go to the planning commission. Between 144 and 200, the code office can issue it. And less than 144, you don't need to go to the code office.
Right, that's demolition, but Len's
Yeah.
question was about
Sorry.
building. And
No,
because we were
sorry, I did say
clearing it-
building, but
Oh,
this is
that's-
about demo.
Right,
This is about garages and demolition.
So that's.
but we made the 144 based on building permits. That's where that number came from. Yeah.
But we've satisfied that question.
And then section 94-7, I actually went back and looked at the City of Oneonta Comprehensive Plan and the City of Oneonta Municipal Code. I spent some time looking through this. What are the parameters that I guess the Planning Commission on its own is going to be making this decision of whether this structure is taken down or not, whether it meets the goals listed? And I don't know how well you guys are versed on the comprehensive plan, but they're not blazingly apparent. So I'm just curious how the Planning Commission is going to be able to do this. I'd also like to know how the Planning Commission on A will come up with negatively impacting the housing availability within the city of Oneonta for tearing down a garage. I don't see where the correlation between taking down a garage has an impact on the housing availability.
Very often, the reason for taking down a garage is to gravel it and then to put in multiple parking so they can have multiple apartments. And converting a single-family residence to multiple apartments would have a negative impact on the housing availability to people other than students. So I think that was one of the criteria that they were concerned about.
So you're saying we've had an opportunity before that somebody wanted to tear down a garage and that there was enough setbacks that they could do a multifamily?
That was one of the reasons for the initiation of the demolition permit process to begin with. What was happening is there was no requirement for demolitions. And so property owners were buying large houses, tearing down what may have been historic, stable places or large garages, and then putting gravel in and thus having offset parking available so that they could then convert the properties into multiple dwellings and rent them out. That was one of the initial determinations for having a demolition permit at all. Prior to this iteration, there was no requirement to have demolition permits at all in order to take garages down. So, I can't guarantee you, but that was one of the rationales that were done, that was brought up at the original time.
Okay. The only thing I can think of with A also is like accessory dwelling units potentially, or like there's a house in Monbourg that has apartments over the garage. So that could be a consideration as well. I don't know, but I'm just thinking of it now that you brought it up. But D, I just wanted to mention, so the kind of the impetus for this legislation is because right now, all demolitions go to the planning commission, but there is no criteria that they are judging. So however vague we think the reference to the comprehensive plan is worlds more specific than what they're using now to decide whether or not they'll allow demolition. So that's just something to consider. I don't know if that's enough for you, but I just wanted to put that up there.
Further discussion?
I have something.
Yes.
I wasn't gonna pull it for this, but since it is pulled. Reading through this and being a part of the discussion, I think a lot of this is read from the perspective of owner-initiated demolition, but I don't know. I wonder if more could be done to define what is grounds for demolition of any accessory structure. That's just me wondering aloud. So if you had a concern, for example, about a garage that was next door to your property, what criteria do we, and it could just be that those exist and I don't know what they are, but, how do we go about addressing that situation? And would it make sense in this chapter of the code? I'm just wondering aloud. Do you have an answer for me? You do, you want to tell me.
We have chapter 92 for unsafe buildings.
Okay.
So if there's a complaint filed about the integrity of a building, there's like 8 or 10, I believe, subsections. It would go to the Board of Public Service.
Okay.
And they'd be able to make a determination.
Cool. I'm on chapter 92 right now. Thank you so much.
Further discussion?
We only have one, historic district, correct? And that's downtown?
No, two, Walnut Street and downtown.
How many structures are we talking about? 100? 200? All of Walnut Street?
All of Walnut Street and just a little bit of some of the side streets. I think there are about 40 in Walnut Street and probably maybe 50. I'm just ballparking here.
So maybe 100 structures are within both historic districts.
Then there are other individual properties too, of course, that aren't in the district, that are on the registry.
Any further discussion here? Further discussion, guys?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just talking about chapter 92. So when I read chapter 92, I did read this. I'm proud of myself. So it does have unsafe buildings, but something that I had asked Councilmember Risberger about, he had mentioned that, does this have something to do, do people have to be living in a building in order for it to be declared unsafe? It's just any structure? Oh, okay. Then we just misread it. Misunderstood. Okay, cool. Thank you. Sorry, that's what I was trying to clarify. Is everything side over here? That's really weird. I apologize.
Further conversation, discussion on this? Scott, you have something?
I just was reading and it said a 94-3F, and it says altering the building's key character. No, let me back up. That's the wrong one. I forgot where I saw it, but it was talking about the inside of the building, the floor plan,
See? Mine-
as it's on file with the codes. I guess my question is how do you buy a house, or you've lived in that house and it's already been changed for years, and then now all of a sudden, because it wasn't on file with codes, now they have the opportunity to tell you you got to put it all back to the original state.
You guys are looking at me. Okay. Oh, yeah.
I was just kind of looking at anybody that could maybe even answer
Okay,
that.
sweet.
I took Rick.
Yeah, could you? I'm just maybe I'm reading too much into it. I just on my.
Yeah, I meant to.
So like it
Give me a
says,
scenario again, where someone has done something illegal, is that your question? And then you buy it?
like right now, if we pass this, because this is a new ordinance. So somebody's done work inside the house.
Legally or illegally?
I don't know. They lived in the house all their life. I don't know.
Legally or illegally? I mean, if you do work in your house, and you're the property owner, you can do work in your house.
Mm-hmm.
And that's perfectly legal. Again, if someone's done work illegally, then there's the potential of doing it. But again, just as you've seen before, when someone has torn something down, they then come and ask for a permit. But again, we've had situations where people have come in, especially from out of the area, and bought properties and simply gutted the place and started doing interior changes without getting any permits at all. And obviously that's a problem. So again, continue with your scenario, just not positive.
Well, I was just wondering, like, because it said it as it's on file with codes. So, like, you know, I buy a house. I want to do some work in there as it's on file with codes. But the homeowner did a bunch of stuff that didn't go through
If you buy a
it.
house and you have a decent attorney who's representing you, first thing you do is you go to codes and you check the codes to see whether in fact what the status of the property is before you buy it, especially if you're going to use it for a particular purpose, because those are public records and anybody can check them. So if you bought a house, there were significant code violations, you should go back to the attorney who represented you and say, how come you didn't check that?
What the question is though is, does this ordinance, if it wasn't done right on the inside of the house, they have the power to tell you to put it all back to normal, or?
That we have anyway. You can't illegally modify a house and then say, well, I just did it, so what are you gonna do about it? I mean, you can't do that now.
It's kind of like that thing on Spruce,
Yeah.
84 Spruce.
Nobody can illegally change the use of a house, do anything, cut up a house into 4 apartments and say, oh, well, too late, you didn't catch me. There's nothing you can do now. That has nothing to do with this. You see what I'm saying?
And so going,
Nor do I think that you want that. You know, if it's a catch me if you can situation, that's a problem.
and so David, on section 94-3, subsection C, how do we read the word impacted then?
I don't have it in front.
It says gutting of a building's interior to the point where exterior features, in quotation, windows, etc., are impacted. Does that mean the homeowner's not allowed to put in energy efficient windows, meaning we're taking out the double hungs and triple tracks to an energy efficient window?
Not without a permit. They can't do it now without a permit. Can they? Well, yeah, all I'm saying is that.
For 30 years, you've said you've surpassed 50 some council
Unfortunately,
people.
I don't have the code.
I don't have the code memorized either.
That's what the purpose is to preserve and protect the historic look of the area. Again, whether or not people, you can have, as you well know, you can get all different types of double hung windows and insulated windows, some of which can be that are available, that for example have panes and artificial panes. Again, the purpose is to avoid just what I'm talking about, which is somebody coming in, gutting the place and say, I already gutted it, what are you gonna do about it now? And say, oh, well, it's too bad, we just didn't catch it in time. It's in order to provide planning, in order to make the community look better. That's all.
Discussion.
Quick question, and Carrie, maybe you can help me with this. Because the whole purpose of this was to make it easier for people to demo a small garage or a shed, so they didn't have to come into the planning commission to do this. And of course, 94 didn't exist before. Didn't Stephen pull everything from here, from elsewhere in the existing code?
A good majority of it, yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And so I think most, if not all, the other rules that are in place here already exist.
Already in that current demolition department.
The only thing that's new is that 144 square feet or less piece. Does that remember?
So to demo any shed or garage today, you have to go before the planning commission.
Yep.
And what's the criteria for them to say yay or nay?
There wasn't nothing clear.
Why is that?
Because a prior council passed a resolution authorizing.
So this adds clarity to any demo above 200 square feet, and it makes it easier for people that want to just demo their shed. They can just demo their shed.
So then why do you think Stephen added in section 94-3 all those other subsections then, if this is really about garages?
Well, no, this whole thing is not just about garages, because houses are greater than 200 square feet, but that stuff already existed in the code elsewhere. The purpose of designing this was to bring everything together, and also has subsection for demoing sheds or demoing small garages. So you either could just go to the code office, get your permit and leave and demo, or you didn't have to even do that, you could just demo your shed.
Okay, so when you guys said over there, maybe I misheard you earlier saying this was about garages and sheds, this is really about any building then?
Well, the whole reason why this was thrown together was because there was nothing to make it, they wanted to make it easier for people to demo an old garage, small garage, or a shed, because right now, they have to go to the planning commission for everything. So, he took what we had in the code, made 94, and did all the demoing into one area, including the piece about demoing sheds, and less than 144 square feet, and less than 200 square feet. So those pieces are brand new, mixed in with everything else that had already existed. It just existed in different places.
And so is there an exception for fire damaged homes?
Fire damaged homes is a statutory provision. If it's up to 50%, it has to be demolished. If it's less than 50%, it does not have to be demolished. That's in state law. It's also in our local law. deterioration of 50%. That's a good part.
Anything further? Hearing nothing further.
Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Roseberger?
Yes.
Councilmember LaPartije?
Aye.
Councilmember Carson?
No.
Councilmember Harrington?
No.
Councilmember Overby?
Aye.
All right. Moving on to motion number 11. Motion that the Common Council concurs with the mayor's recommendation and approves the appointment of the following city resident being a key operative there, the City Board Commission, Landmarks and Historic Preservation Commission, Sarah Kristoff. Her expiration date on her term would be July 19, 2026. Do I have a motion to approve? Luke, followed by Dave. And discussion?
Please tell us about Sarah Kristoff.
She is formerly a designer, now a realtor at Paper Birch Properties. Was extremely highly recommended, actually sat in, I believe, Bob.
Yeah, she was at the July meeting. Yeah.
And she's, I think everybody agrees in that commission made a good potential addition. And so we would hope that the council will approve. Luke?
This is just a question, forgive me if I'm, get the things confused here, but she's, with the real estate background, she's kind of the missing piece, right?
She is.
Okay, okay. And so much, yes.
Indeed, and so much. Have we any further discussion? And if the call the roll, please.
Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Roseberger?
Yes.
Councilmember LaPartije?
Aye.
Councilmember Carson?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Overby?
Yes.
Wonderful. We now move on to motion number 12, that the Common Council approves the 2023 event and street closure application by Destination Oneonta for the Welcome Home Mayor's Summer Reception for Newcomers. That event to be held on V Street on August 12th, 2023, as presented. The Common Council further authorizes the city administrator to make any necessary permit modifications based on future planning meetings with city staff and the applicant. Do I have a motion to approve? Lynn, followed by Mark, and discussion. Any? Dave?
It says as presented, but if I remember correctly, we made an adjustment to where on Beach Street it was, because there was some concern about having a one-lane thing happening. So
Yes.
is that, we're doing it with the changes, right?
That's correct, right? We removed the one-lane closure, and we cut it off basically at the at Wall Street. And that still works for our, I presume. Good. All right. Is there any further discussion? If not, then clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Roseberger?
Yes.
Councilmember LaPartije?
Aye.
Councilmember Carson?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Overby?
Yes.
Wonderful. Moving on to motion number 13, motion that the Common Council authorizes the city administrator to enter into an agreement with the Student Association of SUNY Oneonta, New York, for the continued provision of Oneonta public transit bus services for the periods of August 1, 2023 through May 31, 2024, and August 1, 2024 through May 31, 2025, with an annual charge of $255,500. This item is subject to review by the city attorney. And do we have a motion to approve? Luke, followed by Scott and Katie. Discussion, Katie?
Didn't we approve this last time?
No, we did not. Mark needed to confuse himself. We did not have enough.
That's right. Oh my gosh. Okay, excellent.
Further discussion? Okay, without further discussion, then we'll have you call the roll, please.
Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davies?
Abstain.
Councilmember Roseberger?
Aye.
Councilmember LaPartije?
Aye.
Councilmember Carson?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Overby?
Yes.
Move on. Now, moving on to our 14th point on our agenda, discussion of the 2024 budget. And with that, I believe Jimmy's got materials to pass out.
discussion tonight. We don't have a lot of any presentation to give you other than what we've handed out. Just kind of kicking off the process. We'll be obviously meeting again August 1st, and we'll have more of a presentation as we usually do around this time of year. You'll notice in the first sheet of your handout, we proposed a timeline, basically the same as last year, slightly different dates just to match up with when our council meetings fall. The bold dates that are highlighted or bolded on that indicate dates that are necessary to meet the charter requirements, such as when the draft budget is delivered to council, usually by October 15th. That actually is a Sunday, so realistically, hopefully we can send it on a Friday. November 7th, for instance, the first council meeting in November, we have to review the tentative budget. The second council meeting, we have to have the council submit any revisions, make any revisions to that tentative budget. At least a week before the final adoption of the budget, there needs to be a budget hearing. And the adoption is intended to happen on the first meeting. Once again, our department head requests will be due by the end of August. Today is our introduction. August 1st, again, a bit of a presentation, and similar to what we did last year, I don't think we're going to do the same thing, where we went through, service by service and had department heads explain what does water distribution and transmission entail. I think we've all been through that. I know Ed might have a little catching up to do, and we're happy to meet with you, Ed, and kind of go through what we did last year. One of the handouts, the second part of it, which is 4 or 5 pages, basically lists all the services that the city provides, and it includes the priority score that was determined last year based on council member input. After having those, we had 3 separate special meetings where we had council here with relevant department heads talking about their different areas of service, what goes into providing those services, what their challenges are, and ultimately the council provided their feedback, aggregated that to come up with a general priority score, higher number being a higher score. The mayor also provided input on that. This year, instead of repeating that process, I want to build upon that. I want to try to, evaluate what do we still agree with these. I mean, that's why we handed it out tonight, in case you don't still have it. Take a look through it in advance of our next meeting. See if there's questions you have, specific questions or general questions. If you still feel these priorities generally align, or if you see something that looks out of whack and you want to talk more about it. Maybe in our experience in the last year, we've noticed that priorities are changing. And, I think we will have additional discussions with department heads. I've been working with them to develop some objectives that support each of the priorities. So you have each service area, service category. Are there specific objectives that we are working on that support those services, and how are those going, and what other things might we be looking at in the next budget year? So the exact format or agenda for those meetings hasn't been determined yet, but I think that's something we'll discuss a little bit more next time. We'll come up with some dates that work for everyone to have kind of a special working session, if you will, with the whole council. A few of the things, as is typically the case, one of the first things we talk about will be August 1st. What is our sales tax assumption? Looking at our recent trend for the last 3 years, what does the finance director feel comfortable making? Is it a change, an increase, or a decrease, or staying the same? Discussing what the council is interested in doing with respect to the property tax levy, use of fund balance, water and sewer rate increases or not, changes to OPT fares, other departmental fees. In addition to that, I think this year there's a few areas that we'll focus on that might be potential new revenue sources, such as downtown city parking, possible interfacility ambulance transports, as well as some particular expense categories that are of particular focus this year. Health insurance, cost savings. As you know, we have a health care task force that's been looking into options for, can the city save some money on its health insurance without cutting that benefit in any way. Also wages and benefits. As you know, we're in union negotiations with all 4 of our unions this time, and looking at completing a salary study, which will have a presentation to the council probably at the next council meeting. So that's something, obviously, being a large part of our budget, it needs to be a topic of discussion, and I think will be a focus this year. And beyond that, for tonight, I wanted to open it up for discussion. Any feedback from the process last year, things that perhaps you want to see different this year, any particular areas, revenues, expenses, otherwise priorities. I think, Mark Davies, you mentioned how do we factor in or incorporate community wellness into our budgeting, things like that you want to talk about that maybe can inform our presentation and our future discussions. That's one here. Some input from the council.
Folks. Thoughts? Well, ultimately, I'd like to see us not go to our unrestricted fund balance.
I would say with regard to the community wellness, if you can give us August to kind of tease out a little bit more, what we mean by that and how we envision that, that would be helpful. And then we can certainly, as we're having that August discussion, think about what we might want to bring to you all, the department heads, for discussion, maybe for kind of highlighting some of those within the budget. But if you can give us that time to kind of reflect on, this is kind of a new idea that we're trying to put together right now.
Sure. I wonder if possibly looking through the list here, if there are certain areas where those, as you work through that, it might apply. That would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Katie, you got anything?
No, I was just gonna suggest, as I'm reading some of these things, obviously, we look at something like drinking water. That's something that kind of, to Greg's point, we can pull out of here and identify as a priority. So I think having this is gonna be very helpful for our discussion on this as well.
Right, and not just individual projects, like obviously I would bring up Suncrest Terrace if we were talking about drinking water. But what are we doing as a whole for the city? What projects are on your list? What are you identifying? Is it leaks? I know we've had some major leaks through the years. What are we doing to prevent that? For me personally, I'm so thankful that we've gotten all this rain, because we've gone from already getting down to a level where we would show concern for water conservation to, and I think we're back up into the take a deep breath and we're okay level. So I just, for me, drinking water, it's a great resource that we have here in the city of Oneonta. I just want to make sure that it's secured.
Scott, any thoughts?
No, just, so basically their homework is you want us to go through this list and still see what's priority, if we have any questions, or it's kind of what you're looking for.
Yeah, for that initial meeting.
Conversation at the very least.
And we'll have a PowerPoint presentation, kind of go through, similar to what we did last year with what does our tax cap formula look like, what's the sales tax trends, what have our water rates done over the last few years, and where are we projecting them to go, et cetera.
I think what might also be helpful is to review what we did accomplish throughout the year off of some of this off the list. Like when we look at sidewalks, I know we did sidewalks, but I don't know everywhere we did sidewalks, and did we really accomplish what we were hoping to get in the way of sidewalks? Or did we only use the funds that we had available from the state or chips or whatever?
And I suppose piggybacking on that, if that modifies any of the priorities that we identified, because we've made whatever amount of progress in whatever area that might be.
Yeah, one of the things we've been talking about in our department head meetings is, like I said, defining some objectives. Maybe it's a specific project, River Street water main replacement or something might be under the water distribution transmission item. Obviously, in that case, it's relatively simple. We're working to complete that project. There might be something that's not as straightforward. Maybe there's a certain metric that we can track that shows our progress over time on something that we're aiming for.
Kind of like you say your matrix with the sidewalks, right? Say we have out of all of our sidewalks, we got 60% that we know we need to get fixed. How many did we get to this year? Did we get to 20%, 10%?
And if we had a goal and we didn't meet it, why not? Or did we exceed it? Or are there challenges that are holding us back? you know, staffing issues or funding or whatever it may be. And then revising and tweaking and setting new goals for next year. I see it, you know, kind of an iterative process. Last year was kind of the first year we sort of set the baseline, and now I think we can develop it to be even more of a strategic plan. It's a list of priorities right now, but I think it could become more of an ongoing strategic plan.
Greg, every year, department heads, perhaps begrudgingly, perhaps graciously, agree to kind of cross off some items that they deem that are important to their departments. Certainly that helps us to get to where we get to. I just would be curious to know from each department head, and maybe this can be incorporated into that, and ask of them for August 31st, are there items that we have been putting off for several years that are seen as being, you know, truly important? There's a wind coming there.
What does that look like?
Well, I mean, right, I mean, we certainly recognize that there's been things here that we've been putting off, and you know, as that list grows, or not the list grows, but as the years grow that we've been putting these things off, that, you know, just would like to see if there's things that we can begin thinking about and having some kind of long-term strategic thinking in terms of our budgeting. Maybe some of these things we need to get at and think about how we get at them and have some kind of thinking for it. So I guess I'm just really interested to understand what those things might be.
Okay, again, kind of piggybacking on what you're saying, Mark, in terms of things that we've put off and things that are potential challenges for the fact that we put them off. One of our great resources is our staff, and one of our great challenges, as arguably right up there with Laura, is you know, our retention of staff and the impact of our being compromised in our ability to do that. And I think that's probably something that we need to take a good hard look at too, in terms of realistically projecting, you know, what that might impact the budget this year and into future years. But I think it's a conversation that's happening more sooner than later.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Retention.
Retention of staff.
Yes, sorry.
And then,
Oh, go ahead.
again, with the water theme is we've identified we're approximately 1,200 students less in our community. How does that decrease in revenue for use of water and sewer, how that's going to affect our budget in those boards? A lot of folks.
Just one other thing, Greg, maybe might just be helpful for me is, I know every year when we do the budget for the last 3 years, we get told how much you cut out, but we don't ever really see the budget before you cut. We get kind of what you already cut, and then where do you want us to cut more? I think it kind of goes with what Mark was saying, is like, what the department heads already give up before it gets to us. I mean, I don't know, I mean, I think maybe in transparency to let the residents know what we're giving up too. So to be able to see that, here's if everything was great, we had all this money, this is what they're asking for, this is the overall, even though we know it's a budget we're not gonna be able to get to, but to know what they need, what the ultimate goal is, and then I just think that's be very helpful to.
Relative
Can I
to
respond to
that, which we've respected these last several years, how are services diminished in, you know, maybe it's not been palpable, maybe it's not been obvious, but they, I'm sure, have been. There are things we cannot do. And what does the trajectory of that look like? And that's clearly something that the community needs to be aware of as well.
I just would like to expand on that, Scott. I just want to remind the council that when the expense detail is given to the council, there's a request column from the department heads, then there is a preliminary budget, so you can compare the request from the department heads to the preliminary to see what was cut. Every department head request is provided, not only to the department heads, but to the council, so you can see the total requests and where we begin.
Yeah, but not what they're giving up though. Like,
Pardon me?
not what's given up though. I
Yes,
mean,
it's all in there. It's all the requests are there, then the next column will show that if it's still in there or if it was cut from the preliminary request, from the original request. So you've got the two columns to compare.
Thank you, Jane, for that clarification. I guess to clarify also for what I'm looking at, I appreciate knowing what has been requested, but I'm looking for more of a historical legacy
Yes,
of what may
understand.
have been, prior to my time here on council. Because, I think there are things that have been sitting out there that are kind of high need, not even just wants, but high need, but because of there are other higher needs kind of get pushed back. I would like to understand what those are. And then again, I think there came some conversations about how we might want to think strategically about those, what that might look like.
This has been useful. Anything else? Great. Forward?
Yeah.
Good. All right.
Anything else, Jenny?
Jenny, you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg and Jenny, and all who've been doing this conversations, discussions these last months. Moving on to the supplemental agenda, and I'm going to flip these two items, if I could, please, to move to what would be number 16, our tree planting policy. Allow Mark to be able to get out of here at one point or another tonight. And so I just want to kick this conversation off and with council, take it from there. So my sense of it is that I talked to Dave Hutchison a while ago, talked to Jim Curry, previously city clerk here a while ago, about the tree planting program that the city had in place years ago, not all that many years ago. And there was a communication policy that was a part of that, which, and it's a different program. And I think, so we'll get to that in a second. But from the community's perspective, they were solicited as to whether they wanted to have a tree or not planted in their yard or in the median. And they either opted in or they opted out. And so, and the date would sign off and the tree would be planted, et cetera, with some expectation stipulation in terms of how those trees would be cared for. So this is different. This is a grant-funded program that is specific to the Sixth Ward, am I right? Specific to the Sixth Ward, and it's just a different program. However, from the community's perspective, they don't know that, and so there's a history and a precedent of communication that the community would have expected, and there are a couple of community members, most specifically Mark, who's joined us here, and former Mayor John Nader. I believe Alice, his sister, also is looking at a tree that's planted near her property that she's concerned with. So there are a minimum of 3 trees that are being planted, that have been planted, in fact. And in that process, conversations that might have been expected by virtue of precedent, nothing to do with the type of grant that is involved here. Those conversations didn't happen, so there's been some dissatisfaction around our communications, which you can make a case for. So we have 3 trees that folks would like to have removed. I feel like that we can either have the larger conversation in council here about our policy, generally speaking, and I think that policy more goes to communications, although it is on the CLIC agenda. We're not looking for it to take a lot of CLIC agenda because you're very busy on that committee, but I think that probably is the place for that more robust conversation to happen. But I do feel like there were 3 trees and 3 residents who have expressed concern these last week, frankly. And I'd like to think that maybe this council can come to resolution on that, and then I'll let you guys take it from there. So with that, I'm done. I'll let you guys talk.
Yes, so this is just a couple things. As I drove down through when this all got started, I think 2 out of the 3 trees are actually planted underneath trees that are already there providing shade. And talking to Chris, he said that they were in Greg, when we were talking back and forth, the trees are planted there to provide shade for people walking. I think it's kind of clear that there's already trees there where it's providing shade for people to walk. The other thing in talking with Chris and Greg, when we talk about the city's responsible and the median for taking care of them on the city right away. So I started driving the other day through the city, and I took pictures, and I apologize I didn't get them to the council tonight, but I started looking at our trees, not just in the 6th ward. I went into the 1st ward on some that we planted and something like that. And we don't do a good job of taking care of the trees that we plant. I mean, I got pictures where we got growth spurs coming out of them. Some of them are low where you got a duck to get underneath them when you were walking. And then you're asking for residents who are taking time to make their properties look good. Now they got to take extra time to try to, where they're going to weed whack around them and keep them looking good, because they do take that part of their, even though it's a city right away, as they think of it as their own, because they're proud of what they have there. And also in the 6th ward, it might be a little bit different, is some of our people, as it's been pointed out, are down there are struggling to make even to get out to mow their lawn, because we're population shifts and changes. Economics plays a role in that as well. So, and then the last place I went to look is right down on Market Street, where we just did some lines and stuff. We have a dead tree and a median that should come down. In front of one of the houses on River Street, there's a tree that kind of looked like it got damaged, that really should come down and be replaced, which we could use one of these trees over there to replace it. But then you got power lines across the street, and we got some of these trees that are starting to grow up into the power lines that are in place there. And then, like I was saying before, like one of the last places I went was right down on with Market Street, was right in front of the old Oneana sales building, where we have our bushes growing way out into the middle of the sidewalk. We haven't trimmed them back. We haven't. So I think all of this does have concerns of what the residents of what I was hearing, and that's why I drove around to look to say, is it just in the 6th ward? No, it's kind of all over the city. And I know talking with another council member, stopped, and we were just kind of, pitching ideas back and forth of maybe part of the budget process is to hire an arbor on our staff to go around and take care of this at full time and see where we have to do stuff. So, I mean, I'm gonna make the pitch, and it was kind of my idea when all this started was, I don't think having a lot of unhappy residents over trees is where we want to be with so much going on with the city. I think communication we need to improve on. And I'm a firm believer that our residents still should have a little bit of say, especially when you're asking them to take on a little bit more. So I think that they have some valid concerns, questions, and I just hope you guys take all that into consideration and help them out with what they're asking for. And that's the removal of the trees for right now.
Thank you, Scott.
Just to respond to that, I think we have a city arborist. Is that true that we have him this year budgeted as well?
As a contracted position.
Contracted position, right? So he's right, but and I'm not defending. I'm just kind of explaining. Most of what I understand, most of his role has been is really identifying some of our problem trees and addressing some of those. So I don't know that maintenance has been high up on his agenda. And frankly, because if you think about our trees that are that cover our roads, so many of our trees are much older, right? We have this a lot of old trees, we have very little in between, and then we have all these new trees we've been putting in the last 10 years. So he's really been focusing on that. So to your point, if this was something that was deemed by this council to be important, then we might want to think about what the budget is for that individual for next year.
I was gonna say first, the person you talked to about the arborist, I think was spot on there. Thanks, Pat. You're right, the tree program we have now is very different than what was done in the past, because we're talking about, it's not on private property, we're talking about in the median. And I understand why we do that, and I also understand why people got upset about the trees, because communities that don't have these tree gaps, that have like streets with no trees left, it definitely impacts the value of the properties. So since we are a tree community, we want to try to fill these tree gaps in the medians, but I think we can do a much better job locating these tree gaps, because I drove down there the same day I went to talk to you, and you were right. Where a couple of the trees were located, sure there were gaps in the median, but the front yards all had these huge trees. And then there were other areas on River Street that had no trees anywhere for like a block, and I didn't quite understand the logic on where we decided where the trees went. So I think we can do a better job of locating those gaps. Now, as far as the type of tree we used to plant like 100 years ago, I mean, there are these monstrosities that are just huge, where we've already learned through our Cornell program that we don't plant trees like that. So they're much smaller trees, they're shade trees, but then there's other complications like what Scott was talking about, where we have growths coming up. I mean, there's one right on State Street that the branch is at waist level, and you have to walk into the street to get around this thing. So I really think, even though we have a contracted arborist, I don't think we have to wait to have dead trees pulled out, 6 to 8 months before they're finally pulled out. There's a lilac bush over on the across from the Riverside Elementary that I've watched over the last few years as the tree grew. In the middle of it was never pulled out, was never cut out, and now you can't cut it out. What you have to do is cut out the lilac bush that's around it. So I think we can do a much better job maintaining all these trees that we've planted and spent a lot of time planting. So I think we should really seriously consider adding this to the budget, finding a way to add it to a budget. If we need DPW, there's DPW positions open. Maybe we can hire a full-time or a 75% arborist and 25% other job within DPW. But that way we have somebody from spring through the early fall that's their job. They go around and maintain these trees, pull out the dead ones instead of letting our tourists see dead trees everywhere until later on in the year.
Luke? Yeah, Greg, if you don't mind, for some of these trees that are planted, what was the rationale for? Do you know why they were planted? Why they were planted there?
I haven't discussed with the arborist, exactly each individual location. I know that, and I can't say, the stretches you're referring to, Dave or Scott, where there are no trees planted. In many cases, there are gas mains or other utilities under there that just don't allow it, even though it'd be a great place to plant a tree. Apparently, it's also a great place to put a gas main. Because it wasn't the street. We try not to allow that anymore, but it works as nice to avoid that. Obviously, when there are utility lines overhead, you can plant small trees, but that's not preferable. So I mean, just directly answer your question, Luke, I don't know exactly on each of these locations. I do understand that there's trees on private property that are quite large and have been there quite a long time. I think the thinking is, given that otherwise that median is a good place for a tree because there aren't utility conflicts and that sort of thing. It's on the side of the street, doesn't have overhead utilities running along. That would be a place to plant a tree that in the future would replace those, which eventually I imagine will go away. I'm not sure the exact species that was was planted there. Again, I didn't participate in the actual selection of each spot, but.
Okay.
I was gonna echo, actually, what Dave had mentioned about, there being sort of spots that seemed more appropriate for trees, when you drive along River Street, but, I also remember that there are 2 phases to this planting, if I recall correctly, so there's planting this year and then planting next year. So I was wondering if maybe those were, the gas main, explanation makes sense, or maybe they're part of phase 2. I also was wondering about the fact that these are younger trees and they're gonna take a long time to mature, and by then maybe these other trees are not gonna be in great health, so it's kind of forward thinking in that way, but ultimately I was gonna ask for maybe you to explain it, so we kind of took that out of my mouth, so I appreciate that. I think on the topic of removing them, the thing that gives me pause is that in my ward, and Greg gave this as an example, there is a street where a resident who has street trees in front of their property, and they're old, well-established street trees. And actually, I think they're the only trees left on the block. Would like those trees removed, but the rest of the street, literally everyone else on the street does not want these trees removed. So the hesitation for me is whose precedent, or whose preference takes precedence? Because it does impact, it arguably impacts the resident who has to rake the leaves and weed whack around the trees, and maybe has their utilities impacted the most, but there are other people who have interest, and maybe not in these trees yet. But I am worried about the precedent that this sets for this specific situation in my ward, but other. So until I can have a clear delineation in my mind where this makes sense and that does not, and I can convey that to my constituents who are impacted by my street tree situation in a way that is clear and understandable and inarguable, I can't imagine removing the trees. I get it, I totally get it, and I want to support it, but I just hope that I made my position clear that I think it's more than, I don't want, a new resident to move in and say, I don't like this street tree on my median, can the city take it out? I just think we open ourselves up to a bunch of different situations, and I'm open to learning more that helps make that more clear in my mind. But right now, that's just how I feel about it.
I'm just gonna jump in real quick. I would just argue that these are saplings that are there for less than a week at this point, I believe. The fact of their planting is really the concern of these 3 residents, 3 I believe is residents, and they haven't established themselves. They aren't part of a neighborhood sensibility. There's no aesthetic that they're generating for the street that's different from further down on River Street, where we've already talked about the long expanse, which may very well be gas lines, being the issue there. But so these are saplings, and there's a difference between a sapling that was planted a week ago, and there's some concern about that from day one on those plantings versus a tree that's been well established and has been there for generations. So I would just say, if you're looking for the distinction, to me, that's the distinction.
I will say, I was just going to say, I will say that I agree that the communication piece is something that I'm glad that we're taking a look at, because I think that, it should be a partnership between the city and the residents, so, yeah.
I don't know if anybody has the answer to this. Do we know how long we can expect this ash tree to take to grow to be a size where it might be a problem, where we're going to have to look at utility lines, or it becomes another problem? I don't know the answer to this. I do know that trees can take 20, 30 years to reach maturity. I'm guessing the sapling's quite young, given its size. I know a lot of folks my age, moving into Oneonta, just generally, generationally, are very interested in cities that prioritize environmental issues. Especially one, ash species has been so heavily impacted by environmental issues. So I would be a little bit hesitant, looking forward to remove these trees as well.
Scott?
I just want to clear, there's more than 3 people that have complained. You keep saying 3.
That's 3 is what I know.
There's a lot more. And also, these residents here had the misfortune for a couple storms to be without power in the middle of winter time. So you got to kind of keep that in the back of your mind, is so when you're putting more in and the damage that they've already suffered, but for their not just their personal property, but the fact that their personal suffering of going, being in the middle of the winter time when it first started and stuff like that. Yeah, and this wasn't a short duration of being without power of a couple of hours. This was a long time. So I think they've done their time with this stuff, and I think they have valid concerns, and I think this is one spot where the city can step up and say, we hear you, we're going to help you. You don't have, I don't think that this sets a thing that if somebody comes that we have to remove trees anywhere else. It's it's like everything becomes a case by case basis, no matter what it is. So it's easy to sit back and say it doesn't. You got to remember it. Even though you're sitting back saying it's not affecting me because I didn't do that, you got to put yourself in their shoes of going without the power, for a long period of time, and their concerns and their hesitations. And I think if you can ease their concerns for a little bit, I think that's what the city is all about. And that's an inviting thing to sit there, so when people are moving into the city, you can say, hey, look, we had a complaint, they listened to us, and they really took to heart what they said, and that's the place I want to live, is some place that's going to listen to me and really try to make a better place to live. And I agree with you too, Luke. I understand the whole ash tree thing. I think these, Judy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think these only go up to about 12 foot around that area when we said we were going to do this.
The trees?
Yeah.
They're 3 or 4 inch diameter trees. They're like $300 to $600 trees. They're pretty substantial for what we normally get.
Yeah, so that's the other thing to take in or not.
Scott, it's just
they're not ash trees. Can I say that?
Yes, Judy.
So this grant was awarded to us. We were one of the, there weren't too many cities in the state that could apply for this, but we were eligible for this grant because we had a large number of ash trees that were removed a few years ago with another grant that we got. And we had a disadvantaged community census tract, which is basically the River Street census tract. It includes most of Roundhouse Road as well. So this grant was given to communities that had a disadvantaged community area and that had a large ash tree loss. The trees have to be planted in the disadvantaged community area or in a potential environmental justice area. We took this to the environmental board when I was applying for it, showed them the maps of what those areas are, and they selected the River Street area because they thought that the grant would be a great benefit to the lower income homeowners in that area of the state. That's why it's a disadvantaged community area. So we're not planting ash trees. We're planting trees that are from the list of trees that are approved by our arborist, Fred Hathaway. Fred selects the locations based on a number of things. First of all, he starts with our 2014 tree inventory, which identified locations throughout the city, and then he looks at each individual location in the field to determine if that's a good place to put the tree. We do have about 22 more trees that will be planted in the River Street neighborhoods. Some of the things that he looks for when he goes out there are the overhead lines. the underground utilities, the width of the median, and like I said, that tree inventory, which we've had in place for almost 10 years now, that has the site selected as, or it has identified the potential planting sites. So it's a number of things that he's looking at. He also, in this particular case, one of the trees, there were older trees there that within the next decade or so are probably going to come down. So we are establishing trees for the future in those areas as well. We have a lot of areas like that where the trees are really old. They're not going to be here forever, and it takes a long time to get these trees established. So that's one of the reasons why that tree got planted where it did.
Scott, I just want to go back to you very quickly. So I've been responding to emails and texts and so forth and so on, but apparently not as many as you have. Can you give us an idea of the numbers of trees that we may be talking about? Because that is hopefully an action that comes of this session of council, is that we make a determination as to what we are doing with those trees, where there are complaints. I know of 3 there are.
It's the 3 trees, but there's more than three people complaining.
But it's just those,
Yeah,
just those 3
yeah,
trees.
it's just those 3 trees, but other people, I'm sure in the 6th ward would probably want a tree, and I just think we got to go back to communication. I think this is, I mean, I didn't even know that they were planting them that day until all of a sudden, I started getting, and to tell you guys I was on the phone all day is not an exaggeration.
But for clarity's sake, we're talking about.
It's just those 3 trees, yeah.
So it's what, 107, 105?
That's Mark?
When we first called and we spoke to engineering, we were told that these spots were determined, I think from what you said, that it was an area that needed shade, it provided a canopy, there were no trees there. The spot that I gave you the picture of, the main picture is looking right at our house, and it's clear that there's a huge canopy there. And the tree is in the front, and it's near a group of hedges. The tree is already starting to grow, the branches are starting to grow into the hedges, which will make the sidewalk impassable unless I come by and cut the branches so people can walk. So when Fred came down and we tried to talk to him about it, and first he said the same thing, that it was chosen because of the canopy, and I said, look at what we have here. These are, we've trimmed them now several years to make sure that they're maintained and they're healthy. So we said to him, look at what we have here, and he said, well, you're right, this area doesn't need more shade. So I said, so why was this area chosen? And he said that the DEC has special requirements that involve the areas from the driveways and a number of other things. And he said, quite frankly, this area was chosen because we needed a spot for a tree, and there weren't enough other spots.
Appreciate that. So, wondering though, to answer Scott's question, the locations of these trees, it's
He's 107.
He's 107.
And
it's just down from 2 houses down from you.
105.
Well, it's funny you mention that because the tree it's on John's lot, but it's about 1 foot from our lot. So our property is impinged from that because that tree is, like I said, he told us it's going to be 50 feet tall.
So then there were really just 2 trees then we're talking about. That tree that you and
I
John.
know Alice's tree is there's another tree planted under a tree she has.
So 2 trees.
And there's the tree that's on our lot, which covers John's lot and our lot. So it's 2 trees.
Yeah, there's one in front of Sam's house, where Sam used to
I
live.
think that's the tree that Alice is.
That's
planting.
Alice, okay.
So 2 trees.
Could be 3, but I think there's 2.
Thank you, Mark. So we're talking about 2 trees.
Sorry about that, I thought
No,
it was
you're
3.
Len, did you have
So there isn't really a defined city policy to this. This is, Mark gave or you gave historical perspective that we had someone that used to be on the environmental board and they went around and, you know?
Yes.
Back in the day.
He was referencing me, yeah. I was
No,
talking
Fred
about
is our
Dave-
artist,
Dave.
but Dave Hutchison was the one that went around and found spots for the trees. So we really don't have like a city policy.
We have a tree maintenance plan that we reference as our policy, as well as our tree city commitment, just generally speaking, that we will be planting trees and maintaining the urban forest.
That's the 2014 tree inventory list.
There's the inventory, and then there's the tree maintenance plan. I think I sent that around as well to the council over the weekend or the end of last week. It just outlines generally the goals of the program, the objectives, key players. It references that inventory report. It talks about things about siting. It has at the end there's an appendix that talks about siting trees, a tree planting detail, maintenance considerations, that sort of thing.
And this was approved by a previous council.
This has been in place. I don't know if there was a motion. This has been in place since around 2012, I believe. Judy. I think it was around when the Cornell group came in and originally did an assessment of city's trees, and then after that, we hired Forcon to do the full inventory in 2014. It's been updated a few times. I think we updated it last December, just in anticipation or as part of applying for that grant.
Right, so the grants, back when I did the 3 grants that we got back in 2017, the tree inventory, the tree maintenance plan needed to be updated within the past 5 years. So I updated it then, and basically the only update I did on it was to update the DEC's tree maintenance, minimum tree planting and maintenance requirements in the appendix. And then I just updated it again in 2022. I took out the city manager, put in the city administrator, and again updated the DEC minimum requirements in the appendix. And that maintenance plan is required by DEC when we apply for the grants.
Just to speak to my experience with the other program, which really was just part of our overall program, and I think that it dates back to when Dick Miller was mayor, and this was instituted with the environmental board, Dave Hutchison taking the lead on that. It's always been difficult to find good tree planting sites in the city right of way because of utilities overhead, below, site distance issues, that sort of thing. So Dave, I think, was one who spearheaded, well, let's go out and see if we can plant on private property. And that's not really something we normally do, but we work through and have like a form that they can fill out if they voluntarily agree to take on this tree, and it basically becomes theirs. In that case, we plant them just behind the sidewalk. We're not planting in backyards. They're still basically serving the function of street trees, but they're not in the median, maybe away from the utilities. Those are the cases I know of where we had letters that we'd send out, where Dave would go around, knock on doors, and ask people if they're willing to take a tree on. In my time here, we haven't sent letters out for other trees that we planted within the median, which Dave and company would help identify. Now that sort of transition with Dave moving away from the environmental board to Fred, who was our contracted arborist, who's been doing that for us. And in that last 10 or 12 years, we haven't sent letters saying, homeowner ABC, we're going to be planting a tree in the median in front of your house. So it hasn't been a practice. I'm not saying it can't be. Maybe it should be. I think it'd be a good idea to let people know what's going on. But it hasn't been in the past. I just want to clarify in my history, unless there was something even before that. I know Jim Corey was mentioned. He was here for just a couple of years.
Yeah, I talked to Jim Corey the other night. He stopped by my house and we talked about, yeah, they used to send out letters, but Mark said that was a different program than what this is, so. But I think a lot of communication would have, I think if we had better communication, I don't think we'd be here right now.
So, Mark, did you have something on
I
that?
just wanted to clarify that Dave Hutchinson was kind of using the same practice as Fred is using the 2014 report to go out and look at site specific. So it lists specific sites. He'd go out there, eyeball the site to see if it made sense and if it works for other reasons that may not have been identified. So it wasn't just a random process. He was really trying to use that to guide the planting. And he had kind of created more of an active list, which is what the environmental board over the past couple of years has used, that kind of active list of places that needed it. And those are median sites, not not homeowner sites.
Yeah, and it sounds like Dave was out there talking with the homeowner also.
Yes.
Mhm.
So, in the interest of having an actionable item here, I'd like to think that the conversation around a policy for connection to homeowners might be something that the clique might take on, if you guys don't mind. But this evening, I'd like to think that perhaps we might make a determination as to what we might do with these two saplings that are now just becoming accustomed to the soil that they've been planted in. And if we're going to move them, that we expedite that and find ourselves a more appropriate place for them to take up residence. So if that's something that the council is interested in addressing this evening, maybe we can put together a motion and roll through a vote if you guys are amenable.
Is the motion, what is to become of the tree?
Exactly. So the question, well, Scott's already, I believe, if I heard you correctly, that you've already talked to some residents, and again, there may be issues below ground that need to be addressed, and maybe something can't be planted, but there may be residents that'd be very happy to take a tree. I think that's what you said on River Street?
I would think they would be. It's not.
So pending the identification of a couple of alternate sites, I guess that would be my motion, and I guess I can put the motion out there. Pending the identification of alternate sites that'd be appropriate, that we remove the two trees in question, two saplings frankly in question, to those locales. And I think that's the extent of the motion. Is there something that anybody would like to put forward, and then council second?
I'll make that motion now you said it.
Scott, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, second from Len. Discussion, further discussion? Or do we have nothing?
Can I say one?
Yes, of course, you can say, of course, Ed.
I certainly support the idea of the property owner, the property owner adjacent to the median where the tree is planted, having the opportunity to opt out. I don't think that the property owner should have that decision dictated by his neighbors or necessarily the city. And given that, it seems to me that it would make sense to remove these two trees. So that's all I had to say on
I
this.
appreciate that. Further discussion? All right, well, let's take the vote then.
Councilman?
I'm sorry,
I'm sorry.
clarify the motion, just wording specific, I missed the wording exactly.
You got it?
So as I understood it, pending the identification of an appropriate alternate site, the common council authorizes the removal of the two trees in question and relocates them to said site.
Could we make the motion a little bit less specific in the event that a third tree should present itself, a third or more tree?
How many trees are
I think it's only two.
Yeah,
Okay.
I appreciate where you're going there, but. So we're talking, so we are talking about two young trees just about a week in the ground.
Well, I think that raises a good point though, which is, and I think, Ed, you have a really great point, which is, these people weren't afforded the opportunity to say up front, no, I don't want this tree, but I worry again, sort of, we're doing this for these two trees, but over 20 have been planted, so if someone comes forward and says, I don't want the tree in front of my house either, what do we say, too little, too late? Because we already voted on a motion to remove two trees. I don't know if that's fair. I mean, we could find ourselves in a position of removing like 20, 25 trees that have already been planted. I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea, but I just think we have to think about it for everyone who's been impacted as well.
Would you suggest that we amend the motion as presented to incorporate Ed's caveat that there may be another tree that presents itself?
Well, I mean, it's not just another tree, it could be 20 trees.
Seems unlikely, but
I think we're all right with the 2, and I think that's why we're trying to come up with the,
But I mean, if someone reads this in the Daily Star and then says, I don't want my tree either, and then I'm talking about the saplings that were just planted, they should have the right to come here. If we do this, they should have the right to come here and say, I don't want my tree either.
they have the right to come here and do the same thing, even if, no matter what we do.
So then,
They could come forward, just like anybody else could have. I mean, we've had these neighbors come forward. They had, I would think personally, if they didn't want a tree, they would have complained to us by now. I think. But anybody has the right at any time to come in front of this council, voice their concern, and ask for us to make a decision. It doesn't matter. Not one decision reflects on it to make that decision for the next person either.
but if it's the same set of circumstances and they come to us next week and say, I mean, I'm just concerned that we are putting ourselves in a position to undo.
And do that with every vote we do. Put ourselves in a position. Just,
so the motion stands as written, and we'll entertain any additional discussion. Yes.
2 trees, right? Or 2 trees in the.
That's us.
The 2 trees in question.
Yeah, the two trees in question.
Okay.
I'll move up there. Okay, so if there's no further discussion, we can take a vote.
Councilmember Murphy?
No.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger?
Yes.
Councilmember LaBarge?
Aye.
Councilmember Carson?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington?
yes.
Councilmember Overby?
Yes.
Thank you, folks. We have another discussion item. No trees are involved. And that is downtown Main Street parking time limits. Emily Falco, our 8th Ward council person, who will be most connected to this issue, wasn't able to join us tonight, but I think I can speak a little bit to concern that I've spoken to a few members of the community, the business community. We heard a presentation a little bit earlier from the senior housing work group. We have a population that's aging in place, and the proximity of parking to a restaurant or a business has been impactful, according to the businesses that I've talked to, in people's decision-making in terms of whether or not they're going to be, appearing at that restaurant or shopping at that retail store. It's had some effect. So what various folks have asked for is an extension of our 1-hour time limits that are specifically Main Street. I would suggest wrapping up to the first corner of Chestnut Street as well, as I've heard from a couple of folks that are similarly impacted there, and changing that 1-hour parking restriction to a 2-hour parking restriction. From the perspective of the guy that continues to generate maps for people, the sooner we're able to figure this one out, the happier I'm going to be. So I don't put out information out there that's no longer, valid. So this is something that, Greg, I'm going to let you talk to the mechanics of this, if you would.
Well, I mean, on the map here, the yellow spots, I know it's quite small. I think we've sent around a PDF. The yellow highlighted spots are 1-hour time limit now. The proposal is to turn all of those into 2-hour. Although I would ask your opinion about Market Street. There's a few 1-hour spots there next to the 15-hour spots. I'm not sure if you want to change those to 2, given the use down there, it might be more beneficial to have 1 hour. I don't know. I haven't talked to the property or business owner there.
I'd be inclined to keep it personally.
Okay. But otherwise, the stretch of Main Street from Fairview to Grand and each of the side streets off of that, except for Market, the yellow spaces would become orange, 2 hour. In order to do that, it's work for DPW. I talked with John Williams. We might be able to come up with a sticker. We can, something we can apply on the sign without having to make new signs. Obviously, we're talking about implementing paid parking in the future. Time limit parking would go away. It would be something we would have to redo in the future. We don't want to, if we can avoid having to replace the signs entirely, we will. So as to when this would happen, how quickly, I can't say for certain. It would depend on their schedule. I know it's obviously something that'd be, if it's voted to go forward with this, it would be presumably something you'd want to see done sooner than later. So I'd have to work with DPW just to see what their schedule would allow.
Right now we have this, right? That's what you're saying.
That's
about 1 hour parking. So have we been issuing a lot of tickets?
I don't have statistics. I haven't had a chance to review that. We have been issuing tickets, yes. I don't know the numbers. I can't quote.
And I can tell you just anecdotally that we are issuing enough tickets that I'm getting complaints from the folks that are being impacted, both the folks that whose cars are being ticketed and also the folks whose businesses are being impacted. It's also the threat. We've been very clear about the fact that we are rightfully restricting our parking, and we are ticketing, or at least the threat of our ticketing is something that we're making clear to people so that it is in their minds. We want the traffic. We don't want people parking on Main Street for 8 hours. That doesn't do anything good. So we are trying to regulate our parking flow, and so just the threat of the parking tickets has already had an effect, both positive and negative.
Just to confirm, we're being asked to consider all 1 hour or just Main Street to 2 hours?
Just the yellow spots which are on Main Street and the side streets, like basically any yellow spot except for on Market Street, where there are a few 1 hour spaces that I think.
Yeah, I think those 1 hours are probably fine, but if it, quite honestly, if it's a case of, all or nothing, yellow going to orange, we'll be fine with. Yes.
I might have missed this. You said something about you've been getting calls from people that have been getting tickets. Are they, as the businesses complain as well, or is it just the people that are getting tickets?
Well, I can tell you those folks that serve lunch, for their businesses lunch, and their businesses are well off. I don't know that I want to be naming.
No, I'm not asking for specific.
But I can tell you that I've had conversations with various restaurant owners, and they're hugely impacted.
So they're asking for the shift from 1 to 2 hours. Is that how I understand this?
Yeah, it gives people enough time to be able to park. We're still very much in a mindset that narrative starting to change, where we need to see the place that we are going to when we park. We're going to get away from that eventually, but currently that is the mindset. We have to be realistic in knowing what we're dealing with. So if somebody cannot find a parking space that they feel comfortable that they're going to be able to have lunch and then not find a ticket on their car, they're going to forego lunch, and they have it.
Thanks.
Yes, Kate.
I have 3 questions about this map as it stands. A statement. One is, who is the 4-hour parking on these streets serving? Because there's all day, 24-hour. And then there's 2-hour up against the Beach Street, the kind of office-y complex that's there. So what is that 4-hour? Is that, no, I was thinking funerals, but I'm just trying to figure out who that person is.
YMCA's across the street at 4.
But there's 24-hour and 2-hour, so I guess the 4-hour, this is over by like Time to Tan and the Gals.
Oh, you're over there? Okay, sorry.
Yeah. I'm just genuinely
The former
curious.
Carson Plaza, I don't know what it's called anymore, but yes.
Oh, it's a different color green. I'm sorry.
I'm just curious.
I count cars parked, but I don't follow them.
Okay.
So I see those spaces being utilized, but I can't say that I know literally where they're going. They might be going down to Main Street where they want to park for half a day for some reason, or maybe they're just
Okay.
parking there because that space is open and they're only there for 2 hours. I can't say really for certain if they're being utilized for 4 hours or if it's just
Right.
2.
I think the businesses, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think as we had some input from some of the businesses, specifically those businesses in that, what used to be called Carson Plaza, where you have a lot of, you have psychologists, yoga studios, and you know, other types of things that, you know, people, and also, obviously, you have employees, staff, a lot of part-timers
Yeah, I
in
think
and out there as well.
that's what I'm getting at.
And they had asked for the 2 hour and 4 hour to be, you know, please bring back our 2 hour and 4 hour. And so I think, not to speak for you, Greg, but I think in the construct of this, that was what was taken into consideration.
Okay. Okay, again, that was just curiosity. Also, the blue spaces, which are predominantly on Market Street and then up into the neighborhoods in the north, they are all day except 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., but I'm wondering why you can't park there from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. Especially like up in the neighborhoods.
So historically, we've swept downtown area more frequently than other streets, and that would include the side streets, Dietz, Ford, Main Street itself, Market, in that area. During that time frame, usually it's only 1 or 2 days a week. I think that's something we're definitely looking at that for the future. I don't think right now, like, as an immediate action, would be to try to change all the signage downtown, but we've been looking at what makes sense, and DPW's been talking about, you know, what would make the most sense with their schedule.
Okay, great.
And I think it's also to keep people from parking overnight in the downtown area. We want that area clear in the morning and not have to deal with overnight parkers.
And right now, the modification of signs is a time consumer that a lot of the businesses really hope to not have to deal with. So we are, Greg and I talked about, you know, production of just a sticker that we can put on our 1 hour signs that say these are 2 hours, and that's a lot more quickly done than changing things that are, you know, certain days of the week.
Sure, and I mean, I appreciate that as a consideration. I think just looking at this is the first time I've ever been presented with something like this, and so I just mostly have questions about it while it's in front of me. But I understand the point that the idea is to address the parking on Main Street in kind of a vacuum, not look at the whole thing. Okay, my third question, if it's okay, is to ask about the shuttle and just like how that's going, because
Slowly.
okay.
We are, many people, I think, here saw a video I put together on Saturday.
Yeah.
There was a promotional of what we're doing in Miller Plaza, which is actually organically growing in spite of rainouts and smokeouts and so forth and so on. We're getting there. But within the context of that video, we were also promoting the shuttle service. There's also a brochure that we hope we see already about a week and a half ago, is still at the printers, and perhaps we'll see it on Wednesday or Thursday of this week, which goes to some of the more distant hotels, the Hampton Inn, the Marriott, et cetera, and most specifically at the Cooperstown All-Star Village. The Cooperstown All-Star Village is going to take a bulk of these brochures. They are promotional of our parking generally, but of our shuttle specifically, and all of that connective to our shuttle promotion, which also has not really started, because although merchants do have, we've got 20-something merchants signed up,
Cool.
but currently our ridership is basically Kathy Barati.
Oh, I thought she was still here.
So I looked over too. So we don't have the ridership yet. I did just post to on the, somehow they let me in, the Cooperstown All-Star Village Experience Group, which is thousands of members, and I just posted the video there, and they haven't kicked me off, so I'm going to continue to to solicit there as well. They are our market, getting them to use the shuttle. They will say, free parking and free shuttle? What could be better? You know, where it may be more of a difficult, road for some Oneonta natives to travel. It's an easier ask of somebody who is visiting. Here's a place where you can park, and here's a place where you can take a free shuttle and see all kinds of cool stuff downtown. Then we got you for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
So the hope is that will gain traction, but I would be lying if I was telling you that it's done anything of consequence yet.
What, we should tell the truth.
Why I always tell the truth?
So, no, I just, as I'm thinking about, accessible, longer-term, parking options, right?
That's our hope.
It's
If we
great,
can put
it's
some
right
muscle
there.
memory around it, yeah.
Okay, and then so my statement, I'll just throw out quickly, is I don't know if I feel strongly about this one way or another, but I was looking at the map and I counted all the spaces just for fun. And I'm wondering if we might also consider, or if it would be a suitable consideration, maybe just changing all of the side streets to 2 hour, where the yellow, goes off into the side streets. It's currently 1 hour. It's quite a few parking spots and they're very close and adjacent to Main Street, but I'll say as someone who, will run down and grab takeout or whatever, and has a 4-year-old generally in tow, I have been able, since the 1 hour parking, to find spots on Main Street, and it has been really wonderful. And I totally get the, wanting to linger, we want people to linger, and I think there's a way to do that while still maintaining the turnover that's directly on Main Street. So I would just throw that out, could we consider maybe doing it just on the side streets? Because that adds, I circled them all just to see if that would even be a notable change. And it does look like quite a few spaces. The only one that I wouldn't be in favor of doing that is the one on Dean Street that's next to the History Center. Because those, typically people run to Latte Lounge and get a coffie, and having those spots available for that, I think, as a 1 hour is good. But that's just a nitpick, that's not.
I think I'm a little confused now.
But-
Well, ones did you want to leave at 1 hour? Which ones did you want to change?
So I'm suggesting leaving the ones that are all on Main Street proper as 1 hour, but then the ones that are 1 hour that are on the side streets, like Elm, Ford, Chestnut, and Dietz, and South Main and Water as well. I think those could be changed to 2 hour, and we would gain about as many spots as there are on Main Street itself, but they would be 2 hour, but then it would leave the turnover for 1 hour on Main Street. That's my suggestion.
Are you proposing to make that change now, or is that for future consideration to come back with another map at, say, our next meeting or 2 meetings from now?
Yeah, I'm suggesting that for now in order to accommodate the complaints that the mayor's been receiving with regard to getting tickets for the 1 hour.
If I can, this is a council decision, not my decision, but I will tell you that, again, I just want to, the reality is that people are connected to the visual as to how close am I to the restaurant of my choice. And in talking with the restaurateurs and talking with, talking with Emily, she has an investment on Main Street, and this is important to her as well. The Main Street frontage, that 1 hour being 2 hours is really what they're advocating for. They're not, I don't disagree with you, Katie, but also, quite honestly, I don't think that those empty spots on Main Street happened when we said that we're gonna start taking it. But we've been counting empty spots on Main Street, and there's always 15 spots from Elm Street down, it seems. So whether it's 1 hour or 2 hour, I think that's gonna probably be the case. It's the threat of the 1 hour on Main Street that's really, I think, what we're trying to address here.
Oh, yeah, okay. Side streets adds 50 spots, just for data.
So council? Luke?
I'm just trying to, my only concern is that we do this, we're gonna start getting complaints about there's no parking or the parking spots are taken again.
You're getting those complaints now.
Right, but what if the lobbying becomes, let's turn it back? I don't know, I don't know, I'm just trying to think it through, that's all. I don't feel particularly strongly one way or the other about it.
Okay.
Well, I guess kind of to your point, Luke, what if we try Katie's suggestion, and then if it still isn't easing up, then we can still go to further? Is that, just asking Mark, I don't get the complaints you do, I don't.
I'm advocating for the, suggestions and more urgings of the various restaurant and shop owners, most specifically the restaurateurs on Main Street.
So, Craig, when you were doing the parking, the committee with the parking there, well, did you have any complaints about 1 hour parking in front of the restaurants and stuff like that versus 2 versus all day versus, did they have, when you were doing all that, did any of that ever come up?
Not really, because one of our tasks, our main task, is how do we implement paid parking downtown. So we haven't been spending a lot of time discussing hour limits, because those kind of go away. If you're paying, you can pay for 2 if you want, you can pay for 1. Theoretically, on a place like Main Street where you want to encourage more turnover, it might be a higher price for the 3rd hour or something like that.
I'll let other people go, but I just wanted to say, if there are other people who want to speak,
No, you're fine.
I just wanted to say that, so I rough counted, this is tiny, so I'm probably, these are estimates, but it looks like there are 60 existing spots on Main Street itself, and currently there are 42 approximately spots in the Wall Street lot that are, I think, reasonably accessible. The ones in the Westcott lot, is that what's near Rufino's building? Okay, there are 47, they're significantly less accessible, so I just wouldn't even really count them. There are 60 spots on Main Street, like I said, which again, to your point, is both accessible and sort of within sightline. And then 50 spots on the side streets that are currently 1 hour, that I'm proposing that we change to 2 hours. So instead of changing 110 and having approximately 200 spots that are 2 hour, we would be changing 50 and have 130 spots that are 2 hour and 60 that are 1 hour. I'm a math lady, so I just
So I want to go to Mark and Dave, but just quickly, I just want to say that I don't think that anecdotally, there's nothing empirical about this, but I don't think that the 1 hour, 2 hour scenario around parking is a difference maker in real time of people using those spaces. It's a perception issue.
Okay, gotcha.
For people, and their perception is that there is not going to be enough time for me to go eat.
Gotcha.
And that's impacting businesses. So that's, I don't think that there's a difference outside of your point of the D Street and people running in to the Latte Lounge, although arguably even that might not make a difference. 1 hour or 2 hours, more a case of people feeling some level of comfort that they're not going to get a ticket if they frequent a restaurant.
Gotcha. I mean, I guess we already, the majority of our parking spots are longer than 1 hour. And, so I think we have the opportunity to change that perception, kind of no matter what we do. Because we would still have more, we would definitely have more 2 hour spots than anything.
Mark,
Yeah.
just for your sense of this.
So to be completely honest, I don't have a strong opinion either way. I struggle often to understand the parking issues because I'm someone who frankly walks downtown most times I should come down here. But if it makes it easier for our businesses downtown, actually it makes it easier for some of our businesses downtown, at least the restaurants and bars, people to have patrons, or the perception that the patrons have more time. I understand that. I guess I'm going to flip side of that, I wonder if there's further impacts on non-restaurants and bars, if they, do they feel the same way about giving their patrons more time? Clearly, we're not going to get that answer tonight, so I'm sorry, I usually have talking about most things, but we make a lot to do about parking around here, and my head wants to explode half the time.
There with you. Dave?
What he said. But I would add, since we're talking about having to make stickers to put over all these signs, I would lean toward, and I would even make the motion that we change all the 1 hour spots on the side streets, with the exception of Market Street, change those to 2 hour spots, leaving the Main Street the way they are for now, because if it doesn't work, we make more stickers then, and we change Main Street. But to change everything right now, and then come back and find out from the business owners, like Mark said, that are not restaurateurs, that it's impacting them negatively, then what do we do? I think we start incrementally here. That's my suggestion. So
Sure.
go with what.
I could also, I know you've just made a motion, but before that's seconded, I could also bring to the August 1st session of council a survey where every restaurant and every shop owner weighs in on whether they want 1 or 2 hour. And that might serve to answer some of the concerns that have been voiced, or we can do with a motion.
Was that a formal motion?
Yeah.
Yes, it's a formal motion.
Second.
Okay.
I was just talking.
Now we can discuss it.
So,
If I could jump in.
of course.
Sorry.
You can't, well, you can vote to change the signs, but nothing's enforceable unless there's a statutory change, so that the code conforms with all the signs. In order to issue tickets, there have to be signs and code. You can't just switch one and the other, or switch
Very good
one
point.
and the other. So whatever decision you make tonight is something that's still gonna have to be implemented formally by a determination and a modification of the code to conform with our statutory requirements regarding traffic action.
Does it have to get laid before, like we did with the other code we just did?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're looking at a
You
long
have
term.
it would have to be done by means of an ordinance.
See, I listen to you, Dave.
All right.
Once every 3 or 4 years.
Just mention, and maybe this is a problem, but we have done hundreds of chapter 282 request changes
Right.
over the years without.
If you do chapter 282 in accordance with the statute says that you have to do that, you have to bring the 282 change in front of the council. They can't simply just vote tonight to change it and have you put the stickers on.
Right, but we have it at wording on the desks.
If it's put on as a resolution, it's consistent with the provisions of our code as to how you change it, then you can do that.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Just making sure.
See, I just do it now. And again, that's why we did that, because every time we did it, that's why we set up the code the way we did to allow for that.
All right, thanks. So what are we hoping to accomplish tonight based on that?
Get to bed by midnight.
A sense of council.
From my perspective, if you
Yes.
have a general sense of going one way or the other, then I know what to write to make the motion. And, what goes to 1 or 2. I mean, it's not hard to change on the fly, but they're also wordy motions, so.
So just to add my 2 cents, as for what Dave and Katie said, the side streets and Main Street kind of staying as it is. With those caveats, but yes.
I go 4. I'll agree with you.
I'm sorry, Scott, you said what?
I'm gonna be the 4th. I'm gonna agree with Luke, Dave, Katie.
I probably have a ticket from this meeting now that I think. Okay.
All right, so we have, for your general sense, we have 5, 6 folks would say that sounds like a plan, or?
I thought we were still in the discussion.
We are still, we're not having.
I was thinking like Dave, incrementally, and understanding that there are different businesses that are out on our main street. I would look at what you're suggesting, I guess, is okay, but a little complicated. The restaurants are primarily on Main Street. I would start off incrementally saying one side, either the north side or the south side becomes 2 hour, and maybe the other side 1 hour. See how it works, and then go from there. But you guys have gone to the side streets, which people that want to go to the restaurants don't necessarily look at the side streets. They look at the restaurant or the store that they want to spend some time in. So.
I do not mind, folks, I do not mind taking, it's only a 4-block downtown. I don't mind coming back with something that's more fact-based around people's desires, if that expression is going to have value as we move forward.
We just haven't heard from Councilmember Ogilvy.
Yes.
What Len said. I do have one thing that I would like to throw out for future, not something to vote on tonight, but the parking spaces in the park that are restricted to 24 hours, I wonder if it wouldn't be a good idea to set aside a half a dozen of those for people that are taking the bus, the Trailways bus, out of town, and spending a couple of days in Connecticut or down in the city, so that they could drive down there, park, leave it overnight for, like a park and ride would be on the Hudson North Metro stop or something like that.
Yeah, and actually, when they were at the parking garage, we would allow Trailways to have a sheet of paper, something official they would print, give to the person who's parking and riding, and leave it on their dash, and we wouldn't ticket them. We'll do the same thing at Damascus. That option.
So we don't have to change the map then?
No.
I don't think we do now.
That is the other thing I would look at, what my map is going to look like. Okay, so it does appear that we have enough for you to be able to move forward with, Greg? Okay.
There's been a motion and a second. I don't know if you want to withdraw the motion, you want to table it, do it this.
Motion to table.
Okay. Second? Second. All right. All right, so we need to vote on it. Do we? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
No discussion, we need to vote.
Okay.
Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember McCarthy?
Yes.
Councilmember Parshu?
Aye.
Councilmember Carson?
No.
Councilmember Harrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Ogilvy?
Yes.
All righty. That takes us to the end of our agenda. Do we have any additional business or anything for council discussion among our various players here?
I would just like to,
Smiling at me, I'm not sure why.
I just want to bring up a concern that was brought to me earlier today by a property owner, long-term property owner on West End Ave. They are very concerned about 2 of the residents that are sporting their hot rods up and down the street. They're going up and down West End Ave and Chestnut Street, along with a few other ones. The speed limits that these people are engaging, they don't have a speed limit, obviously, they're excessive. They're very concerned about the school-age children that are crossing the street up and down West End Ave and the side streets. So I would ask that the Finance Committee at your next meeting, if you haven't pushed forward for those 2 black boxes that gather data, that clip we talked about, so that we can do 2 streets at a time, that you move that forward, because I think that was really low cost impact.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah, I know I brought that up. I don't remember if that was at Finance or if that was at Click that I asked Greg about those.
You did ask about the cost. We found out it was really cheap, and I thought it was going to go to Finance, but I just haven't seen it get on your
No, it
agenda.
hasn't been on the finance agenda.
So I would just ask that we get that, so we can start collecting data. We did talk about it at Click the last meeting, about West End Ave and Morgan. This individual was very, very upset. And he has grandchildren that are crossing from there to his daughter's house on Morris.
I don't want an answer tonight, because I know we all want to get out of here, but Greg, could you just maybe, I got a quick question that maybe you can send an email to us for, is when winter coming up, what are we gonna do with our snow removal, with all this parking that we're doing on Market, with the fact that the parking garage is gonna be closed when we tell everybody they gotta be off the streets?
Damaski Field Lot, you remember a couple winters ago, not last winter, but 2 winters ago, we opened that up for off-street parking during snow emergencies. It wasn't utilized at all. Now it might be different with the parking garage being out. So we'll do that again if we need to. I think we'll expand to the lot across the street by the large pavilion, and I think that will probably just about cover it. If we have 27 Market Street demolished, that's another area that could be used for temporary parking. Those are the options that I can say right now that we've been thinking about.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, well, yeah, no, I got it. All right, do we have any correspondence?
You do.
Okay.
You have one item of correspondence that's been asked to be read into the record. It's from an Alice O'Connor. July 18, 2023. Gentlemen, I'm contacting you to reiterate my concerns and those of many of my neighbors regarding the reference project. Her subject line, I apologize, is River Street Tree Project. As stated in my previous email of 7/13/23, I fully realize and appreciate that this project is well-intentioned and an attempt to do something positive and good. As a homeowner at 95 River Street, I would have thought that a letter would have been sent to the affected homeowners as a courtesy, providing information as to when and specifically where the trees will be planted, as well as the expected responsibility of the resident regarding maintaining the tree. The fact that the trees are being planted on the city's right-of-way should not negate the city's responsibility and transparency to notify its taxpaying citizens. This courtesy letter, which should have been step one, would have been a way for us to have a conversation about the expectations of the property owners regarding the trees. While I believe the idea is well-intentioned, the reality is very different. The unintended consequence of this project is that an undue burden of tree maintenance has been unknowingly placed on our neighbors. This is reason enough to rethink the project, or at the very least have an open conversation about it with the Sixth Ward residents. In driving down River Street, we'll realize that our neighborhood already faces challenges. Further, you can conclude that it may be difficult for some of our residents to maintain the aesthetics that I believe you are looking for. All affected neighbors should have been informed of the homeowner's responsibility regarding weed eating, trimming limbs that will inevitably block the sidewalk, breaking and removing fallen leaves, and encroachment of the roots on the water lines, etc. Further, what is the city's plan when the maintenance is not met? Will the homeowner be cited by code enforcement to mow, weed, trim, etc.? Which city department will be responsible for ensuring that the trees are in fact maintained and do not become an eyesore in our community? These are questions which I would like answered. I've left several messages to try and discuss this matter directly, but neither of you has called me back. As you're undoubtedly aware, we are faced with ongoing code violations in my neighborhood, puts in parentheses 102 River Street, and little or nothing can be or is done about it. More of the same is beyond untenable. I have been made aware that a tree was planted in front of my house last week with no notification, and worse, it is planted directly in front of and underneath the tree already on the property. This seems like a silly location and certainly an unnecessary one. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend the common council meeting scheduled for tonight. Please let this correspondence and my previous correspondence serve as my objection to the continuation of the project until my neighbors who are affected by this are properly informed and provided an opportunity for discussion with city officials. Looking forward to discussing these concerns with you. Signed, Alice Nader O'Connor.
Okay, thank you. And you have a second one, or is that it?
That's it.
Okay, that's enough. All right, so with that, we will need an executive session on a matter leading to the employment of an individual and contract negotiations. So I'm going to ask Joe and Ginny to stay, and I'm going to allow everyone, including you, Dave, to go home and
Yeah, sure, I'll make a motion.
so motion is that we move to executive session and seconded. Scott and then Katie, thank you very much.